never have understood those people that have a death rate. You know, they go out over those glass areas and look down, it's 1,000. I don't know.
Test 1 2, test 1 2.
Brian, did you break this thing? I did. Okay. We're good. Ready to get this thing.
Test 1 2 3 4, test.
Get back home and rock my granddaughter to sleep tonight.
We'll call the meeting back to order. Our live stream is working. I apologize to those listening online. We read a proclamation for Soji, Dorothy, and Christina. If I had it, I would reread it for the record. Christina took it. Doug Clark shared 5 minutes. And Wayne was sharing, and before we got to public comment, the response, I'd like Wayne to come back up to the podium. That's fine.
Your
We had
Honor,
another engagement.
Your Honor, maybe Sherry wants, she's the next speaker, so.
Oh, Sherry, why don't you share, and then we'll address them.
Well, I have a hard time with 5 minutes. I already did my speech, and it's 15 minutes. And so I think I'm just going to hand this to you, but I do want to do one part myself. Oh, Lisa, I have handouts.
Excuse me, Linda, are you going to be talking on the same topic that Wayne
It's the
addressed?
same topic, and it's pretty closely related.
And I need your name and address, please.
My name is Cherry Webster. I live at 118 Country Bluff Drive in Country Bluff Estates. Country Bluff adjoins Fountains on Fall Creek at 3855 Fall Creek Road. Oh, before I go too far, I want to thank you for deputizing the MS4 coordinator to allow him to write citations for violations on development sites. I wish we had had that last year, but I think that's a good idea, and Country Bluff would like to request an MS4 inspection on Fountains on Fall Creek.
Excuse me 1 minute. Stan, did I deputize an MS4 enforcement officer?
You did not, but it's been done.
Okay, somebody did it. I thought it was your idea. I was going to give you the credit. Well, thank you for doing that. And can we request an inspection? So you might want to know, why do we want an MS4 inspection? Well, the reason is because there's no detention pond on Fountains on Fall Creek, 52 acres. After 17 months, there's still no detention pond there. In fact, there have been 3 SWIPs, 3 land disturbance permits, all of the same SWIP. The DNR had a little bit of success getting something done. The county and the city have not. But there's really a whole nother reason for why there's no filter basin on that property. And it is this: modus operandi. A letter came to one of our residents last week from a Sunshine Law records request. And this is a letter from the developer's engineer to the Department of Natural Resources. It's a response to the DNR's warning letter to the developer, which was in response to an on-site compliance inspection performed on February 24th, 2020. I'd like to read one paragraph This is the engineers writing. Immediately following the receipt of this warning letter, the contractor, who was also the backhoe operator and had a bulldozer out there as well, the contractor contacted CPW Engineering to discuss the details of the letter received and to come up with a corrective plan addressing the revisions required due to the increased area of trees cleared from the original plan. The original plan was to clear the land in phases, but due to a pending annexation into the city of Branson, the landowner, the developer of Fountains on Fall Creek, instructed the contractor, the backhoe operator, to clear the majority of the property without notifying the engineer in order to revise the land disturbance documentation. So, what is it saying? The man knew full well that after the first reading of his annexation, he was going to have 14 days before the second reading came up. He wanted to get rid of a 40-acre forest. He didn't want his engineer to know, and I bet you he didn't bother to tell the DNR or the county, because that's the land disturbance permit active at that time was the county and the DNR. So if the developer is telling his contractor to hide this, what kind of impact is this going to have on a development project? I won't be able to go through all of it. You can read my 2-page letter and you can match it up to the handouts that I gave you. But the bottom line is the sequence of activities according to a SWIP, a stormwater pollution plan. Item number 3 is you put up your erosion control measures. Item number 4 is you construct the filter basin, and item number 6 is you remove the trees. Well, this developer removed the trees as item number 3. And so 17 months later, there's still no basin. There's no basin, filter basin, there's no stormwater detention pond. They can be one and the same. So what is the effect of not constructing a filter basin? Well, in your packet are included 2 pages, pictures of flooding from May 25, 2020, which was less than 2 weeks after the property was annexed into the city. And the second picture is from May of 2021, which was after 1 inch of rain over the course of an hour and a half. And what the picture you're looking at is lot 35. It's inundated. So the other graphics that you'll see are the design of the SWIP that the engineer prepared. The overall picture of 52 acres, you'll see down the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a couple little dots. That's the house and the barn. It's at an elevation of 870 feet. If you look at the middle of the proposed filter basin, it's 815 feet. So you've got a 55-foot drop over the course of about 500 feet, and that's called steep. That dark square area is the basin. It's over 200 feet by 200 feet for over 40,000 square feet. But if you look at the little box to the right of that basin, you will see a 13,000 square foot lot 35, and then about 4,000 square feet of lot 34 is also being used for detention. So the developer is using 17,000 square feet in 2 country bluff lots for the stormwater detention of his 52-acre parcel. That is not logical, not reasonable.
You're down to 5 seconds, I'm sorry.
And so what we would like to ask is if you would please review the materials and look at this is the modus operandi. Human beings are creatures of habit. If that is the modus operandi for that particular project, it's going to be his MO for every other project.
Time is up.
Mr. Skanes, Mr. C., what are you going to do when this developer moves into your ward? Are you going to protect the residents, or are you going to protect the developer? Thank you very much for considering us.
Linda,
Can I answer your
before-
questions now?
Yep, before you leave. I have heard this issue now for months. And Stan, we may need, I don't know if you want to address it, or maybe Joel. When I've asked the question about the stormwater runoff, I was irritated when Country Bluff Estates was getting flooded prior to this property being annexed. And I was told, it's not in the city, it's a DNR issue. After it became annexed, then I knew for certain if there's a property within city limits that is having excess runoff and flooding the neighbor adjoining them, surely the city can do something. Again, what I was told was that is a DNR issue, and I was told, I need to be corrected if this is wrong, that DNR actually went to the site, did their studies, and said the water runoff was suitable, fit within their criteria, there was nothing excess. On that rain on May 21st, I drove out to Country Bluff Estates, and it was a river. So I guess I'm looking for some clarity.
Can I add?
Let's stand.
Okay,
Let's
go
stand.
ahead, sorry.
I spoke to the gentleman from DNR out of the Springfield office myself, because I have asked the same questions, and he informed me that they do not, that property is in compliance as far as the Department of Natural Resources is concerned. He also told me that they do not actually review the amount of water, they review the runoff, that what is in the actually in the water, the chemicals, the silt, and all that. That's what the MS4 does. I have had our MS4 person checking the water repeatedly to make sure it doesn't get to the level that it becomes a violation. Director Hornicle is on vacation this week. What I've written in my notes here is to have the MS4 officer, along with planning and zoning, along with the engineers from Public Works, go back and complete a full and written report for the board as well as Country Bluff Estates, so we can get rid of the miscommunications that are occurring. I know the gentleman from the Department of Natural Resources, he clearly said they are in compliance at this time.
Okay, well, this photo of the handout that Cherry handed out is dated May 20th. This was the date I was out at Country Bluff driving around. I'm not sure what DNR's instructions were or what they were looking at. I can tell you, not being an engineer, average citizen, this is excessive runoff from a property that's located in the city limits of Branson onto a neighboring property.
You are correct, and that's why we are trying to get, the problem isn't there. The problem is actually downstream. The problem is, that's what I've been told by engineers, okay, and by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. Putting in the new sewer lines, correcting downstream what is occurring, will open it up and allow for some of this to be resolved. The other problem that I have right now is that I have also been told that until the property owner submits some form of a plan or building permit, the city has no authority to make them do anything.
Okay, Stan, the property is in Branson city limits. We surely have some control over a neighboring property that is flooding an adjoining property.
It is considered, until it is perfected or building occurs on it, it is considered to be basically an act of God. Am I correct, Mr. Attorney?
You are, Stan. Surface water is a common enemy to all. That's how the case law reads out on this. So when we met with that subdivision, I forget when that was, but it was in our municipal courtroom, we went through this. There may be a potential cause of action for the homeowners association against the developer if there is The surface water that is flowing onto their property is the result of any action on him. As far as the city's concerned, we're limited with our powers by our city code. And as Stan suggests, we come into play once those permits are put through.
Okay. I'm probably out of line here, but that is not an acceptable answer.
Thank you.
We can't have, prior to the trees and the grass being removed, there wasn't this issue. The trees and grass was removed when it was in the county.
Correct.
Now that it's in the city, it's flat, it's bare land, and it
Correct.
is causing this flooding.
Correct. I believe it is.
Mayor,
Yes, Alderman Gaines?
the alder lady on this side would like to speak.
Alder lady?
Alder lady.
This older lady just has a couple of questions. Well, first of all, if there's going to be an inspection by our, an MS4 inspection by our inspector, I would like to also request that any and all inspections that have been provided be submitted to the board for a review, so we can kind of see a history. And then also, I have a question. Were permits issued for land disturbance?
They were issued by the county, was my understanding.
So there's not been any permits issued?
Yes, there was a 6-month valid permit that was issued July the 6th, 2020, and expired January the 2nd, 2021. And we were told by the city, Joel said, can't enforce that land disturbance permit because there's no active development on the parcel. Well, when you go to the city code and you punch in active, there is nothing in the land disturbance chapter that has anything relevant to do with this type of stormwater situation. There is the word undergoing development, but what does that mean? Does that mean the heavy equipment is running back and forth? Does that mean that there's a building construction permit that's already approved? How about a building construction application? Because there was that. Or does it mean that, I mean, what does development mean? What about water and sewer infrastructure? Because during that whole process, from the time that he was annexed in May the 12th, the property was undergoing development. June 23rd, 20, there was a resolution of infrastructure cost sharing. And what came out of that was the continued work on the city staff on the behalf of the developer to apply for $85,000 from the sewer district, and you just approved that. And then there was ongoing dialogue with the county to bore under Fall Creek Road for water access. And so there's been, that property has been undergoing development, not with the heavy equipment, but other things have been undergoing. And why, to me, it sounds like a lame excuse. And if your city code is that inadequate, don't tell Planning Commissioner Davis that I said this. I would recommend that the city code be changed. There be some proposed changes. We tried to do that last week at the Planning Commission meeting. We thought that the Planning Commission, we hadn't been there before. We know that they reviewed code changes submitted by the staff. We thought that they perhaps had the power to initiate their own code changes. And if we went there and explained, here's the problem from here to here, you can see the voids where everything breaks down. We have a couple of our own proposed code changes. And perhaps they could help us. Well, the response we got from Chairman Davis was, I didn't bring my notes with here, I have the quotes. If anybody on this board, this commission, at this table, thinks they can write code better than our professional staff, Chris Lebeck, Joel Hornicle, and their staff, they are in error. I'm sorry, I am not in error. I don't give up on intimidation tactics. I am here asking you to change the city code. Mr. Davis seems to think that this is a unique problem, that there are no other, unique situation, that there are no other problems associated with the annexation and the development of this project. And I submit to you, MO, modus operandi, hide what you're doing, ignore the rules, game the system, crystal clear. And so if you don't change the city code and your existing code isn't adequate to address this, then the same thing's going to keep happening. And then next Alderman meeting, there is the amendment from the Planning Commission that has to propose changes to the annexation chapter and the zoning chapter. And the reason we went to the Planning Commission in June and July was once you're looking at those two chapters, the changes that you've got, they're inadequate. While you're there, let's add some more.
Okay, Chair, excuse me. Attorney LeBeck, I recall at a Board of Aldermen meeting with the developer here, and he was asking for, I believe it was an extension. And in exchange for, it might not have been an extension, he's asking for something from the city. In exchange for that, he offered to put in a stormwater detention basin. Do you recall that?
October 27th, it was a resolution of support. I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I'm remiss to tell you this, but I want to make sure that we're staying on topic and on agenda tonight.
This is an open public comment.
Mr. Mayor, please let me finish. We have a posted agenda tonight. The purpose of public comment under section 2-70, I'm going to read the relevant portion. There may be an additional 5 minutes. A person may only speak. Let me find it here. Hold on. I just had it. The bottom line is the goal of public comment. There's a line in here where it will be referred to city staff. A person may only speak one time per public comment, and I quote, items raised under public comment may be referred to the city staff. The reason I bring this up, Mayor, is so that city staff can prepare the necessary information so we can provide the board precise information so that this could be properly posted as required under sunshine. So again, I'm not trying to minimize Sherry's points. I just want the board to be aware that we are way outside of the agenda. We are way outside of section 2-70. She's made her public comment. If the board wants to refer this to city staff for investigation, for review, and for feedback back to the board, I'm happy to do so. I know Mr. Hornicle and his representative, Mr. Phillips here, the planner, are as well. So we're just, again, that's where we are right now.
Thank you for that.
Could I ask one more real quick? Could you give me your recommendations on the ordinance?
No,
items? Do you have those?
I don't have them with me, but I can send them to you.
Did you get them to me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm assuming then, Attorney LeBeck, I can make a staff request?
You can. It says items raised under public comment may be referred to the city staff. So again, if we follow the agenda during your mayor's observations at the end or any of the board members, that's where you would probably appropriately make that request.
Okay, I would like this to be an agenda item at our next meeting. I would like our attorney to provide this board with any and all possible recourses that we can take addressing the developer's property, the Fall Fountains property. What can we do as a city to prevent this neighboring property from getting flooded every time it rains? There has to be something that we can do on properties that are located within the city limits. Any other board have any other staff requests?
I just have a question, Mr. Mayor, because I'm not familiar with who owns lot 34 and 35.
I can answer that. The title right now for Lot 35 is my mother's, but she has moved to heaven. I am the executor.
34?
So, pardon?
34?
Lot 34. Lot 35 As of January the 13th, 2021, the developer bought the property. He was using the property as his detention pond for 11 months without the property owner's permission, and he bought it in January solely for the purpose of the sewer easement. The owner didn't want to give an easement, didn't want to sell an easement, she wanted to sell the property.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I concur with your request to ask for staff to prepare something to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. I think we've all visited this over and over and over. It doesn't need to happen to them or anybody else again.
Thank you, Alderman Gaines. Any other Alderman?
I second that, or third
that would
it,
be
or
a
whatever,
third.
third it is, yeah.
Alderman Denham?
I'm just shocked right now that nothing has been done and that we just keep using the excuse, well, that was in the county at the time and this was in the city, and the entire way that that property was annexed and then improperly zoned is a shame, and it puts the city in a position, a lawsuit position. I've brought up the zoning on this property as well, which I firmly believe, and I'm going to recommend that this goes through the proper legal zoning process through our Planning and Zoning Commission Board, and then through this Board of Aldermen. The rights have been taken from the Planning and Zoning Commission Board, and it was not properly presented to this Board of Aldermen either.
Okay, so I've been corrected that we are off the agenda, so we've been asked to make staff recommendations. Do you have any other further recommendations?
I'm not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members?
I concur with what we've been saying, so.
Okay, so it sounds like the board is making this request.
Mayor
Cherry?
Milton, thank you very much for your continued attention to this issue.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it.
Cherry,
And
thank you
Ms.
very
Denham
much.
as well. Thank you.
To respect our time, we need to move on. Whoever's last on the agenda tonight.
Wise ribs.
Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers?
Yes, Your Honor. Gary Grellman, he's speaking on various topics. His address is 350 South Wildwood Drive, Branson, Missouri.
I will ask Gary that question, make sure it's correct.
Look at the old seagull.
It's good to see you back, Gary.
Good to be back. Earlier this year, Gary Groman, 350 South Wildwood Drive, Branson, Missouri. Earlier this year, during the comment portion of the meeting, I inquired on the rationale for the 45-mile-per-hour speed limit on Fall Creek Road between Highway 76 to about a quarter of a mile from the intersection of Fall Creek Road and Wildwood Drive. To date, I have not had the courtesy of a reply from any of my elected Ward 3 aldermen or the city. I know there is no requirement for response to public comments. However, is it unreasonable to expect that if a Branson citizen takes the time to come before this board, bringing an issue that is directly within the purview of the city's business, as opposed to something that the city has little or no control over, that they receive some sort of response from either their elected representatives or the city government? With the possible exception of myself, I believe that this basic courtesy, public service, as well as concern and respect for those who serve, mandate that the answer to that question is no, that is not an unreasonable expectation. That's one thing. That's the first thing. Second thing, a while back, the board discussed the possible sale of 3 bronze veteran statues. Although I am not sure, I recollect something about them being put out for bid. I'm interested in knowing if that happened, and one way or the other, when the results will be made public. I would also again express my belief that those statues are probably worth more to the city of Branson than any money we could receive. That is particularly so for the one in the Veterans Memorial Garden. Taken in total, what a beautiful tribute to veterans and Branson's commitment to them. Just a thought. Has anyone thought about contacting Silver Dollar City to see if they would donate the land for a permanent Veterans Park, providing they could leave their sign there? Thank you.
Well, if you want to, let me just respond by saying You made a good point about being responded to. I promise you, you will be responded to promptly on the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. The question on the statutes, Stan, do you have an update?
I can actually give you an answer to both of your questions.
Well, hey, boy, you ought to be in Vegas.
Well, I apologize.
Is that where you been?
I apologize. I can't actually answer the first one, but I can tell you that after the meeting, the engineering department was instructed to check the speed limit and get back with you, and I will find out why they did not do that. Let's put it that way. Secondly, on the statues, they were put out for bid. We did receive one bid. I do not believe the bid is sufficient considering what was paid for the statues as well as what they are worth to this community. And on August 24th, I'll be bringing that bid to the board and requesting that they reject that bid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
And if I'll even answer your third question, yes, I have talked to the folks at Silver Dollar City about that property, and my Parks Department director hopefully won't kill me, but I have tried to get it for the city just for exactly the purpose you said, and I have not had any success as of yet. Let's put it that way.
Mr. Groman? I would like to say, yes, you are correct. I totally agree with you, and please accept my apology just for me not getting back with you, because you are very correct. You should be responded to. It's my understanding, and I'm not sure where the cutoff, but I asked about Fall Creek Road, and Fall Creek Road, from what I am told, from Highway 76 to Wildwood belongs to the City of Branson.
Yep,
From Wildwood to 165 belongs to the county. And then you get on 165 and that belongs to the state. So maybe that's why there's a little bit of confusion, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But I will look into it, and thank you very much for
thank you very
bringing that
much,
up.
appreciate that.
And Mr. Groman, I did talk to Stan after our meeting that last time, so I'm interested to see why you didn't get an answer from the group either, so.
Hey, we're all on the same, what a night.
Woke up in Vegas.
Kumbaya. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers?
That's all our speakers.
Oh, very nice. I didn't. It was quick and easy. Now, next is a consent agenda. Are there any items that any member of the audience would like to have moved down from the consent agenda to ask additional questions or comments? Those listening above don't like us to have private comment,
Oh,
communications.
I would just like to pull the ordinance for the alcohol and food.
And your name and address?
Nikki Civils,
Okay, thank you, Nikki.
address is 121 Summerbrook Lane, Branson, Missouri.
Thank you, Nikki. You have that, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Anybody else in the audience? Oh, hold on.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Pearl Haining, 1440 State Highway 248, Branson. I would like to request that item number 17 be moved down for discussion, please.
Thank you, Pearl. Anybody else in the audience? Any members of the board?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I request that items 15 and 16 be pulled down for discussion, please.
Any other members of the board? Madam Clerk, would you please read the items on the consent agenda as amended?
Your Honor, I'd just like to clarify, so we're all on the same page, that we are pulling down items 14, 15, 16, and 17, if there's any other changes. And then we will, just to clarify, have public comment or discussion at the time on each item.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the items on the consent agenda are as follows. Approval of the Board of Aldermen minutes for the July 22nd, 2021 study session, July 27th, 2021 regular meeting, and August 2nd, 2021 joint meeting. Acknowledge receipt of Human Resources Committee minutes for the June 23rd, 2021 meeting. Final reading of Bill Number 6024, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget to adjust monies in the general fund for ETC Institute to design and administer the resident and business surveys for the city of Branson. Final reading of Bill Number 6025, an ordinance approving the contract with ETC Institute for community and business surveys and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6026, an ordinance approving the contract with Tingo Internet for Wi-Fi upgrades at the Branson Lakeside RV Park and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6027, an ordinance amending Chapter 78, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Spaces, Article 3, Public Improvements, Section 78-125 of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to sidewalks to be kept free from obstruction and in good repair. Final reading of Bill Number 6028, an ordinance amending the adopted 2021 budget for the city of Branson to adjust monies in the tourism and transportation funds for the 2021 asphalt and overlay project. Final reading of Bill Number 6029, an ordinance accepting the proposal of Levin's Asphalt Construction Company Incorporated for 2021 mill overlay, patch, repair, and striping of various city streets and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6030, an ordinance amending the adopted 2021 budget for the city of Branson to adjust monies in the Capital Projects Fund for the undergrounding of utilities in Segment 3 of West 76th Country Boulevard. Final reading of Bill Number 6031, an ordinance approving the contract with CenturyLink Communications, LLC for relocation costs of telecommunication facilities relating to West 76th Country Boulevard improvements project and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6032, an ordinance approving the contract with CenturyLink for relocation costs of telecommunication facilities relating to West 76th Country Boulevard improvements project and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6033, an ordinance approving the contract with Show Me Technologies LLC for relocation costs and telecommunication facilities relating to West 76th Country Boulevard improvements project and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6034, an ordinance approving the contract with Seabridge Acquisition LP DBA Suddenly Communications for relocation costs of telecommunication facilities relating to West 76th Country Boulevard improvements project and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Final reading of Bill Number 6040, an ordinance approving the renewal of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Missouri Department of Public Safety pertaining to the Law Enforcement Support Office Program and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. Your Honor, that concludes the reading of the consent agenda as amended, and the floor is open for a motion approving all items on the consent agenda.
Beat me. You did good.
We have a motion, almost a second. Oh, there it is. We have a motion and a second. Please vote on the consent agenda.
Your Honor, the motion passes 5-0.
Okay, can we start with item 14?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the next item is the final reading of Bill Number 6035, an ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to food sale requirements for establishments that serve alcoholic beverages. The floor is open for a motion to approve the final reading of Bill Number 6035.
Oh, we have a motion and a second. We'll have a staff report by Chris Lebeck.
Mr. Mayor, I really don't have a staff report. I've spoken at the last meeting. I think the public wants to speak on this.
Very nice.
As the board knows, this is just merely a policy decision in whether the city wants to continue to mandate businesses to sell food, to sell intoxicating liquor. In other words, this is, do you want to force a hot dog to buy a beer in city limits. So again, no staff report at this point.
Anybody in the audience wishing to speak to this matter?
Hello.
I remember you. Name and address, please.
Sure. Nikki Civils, 121 Summerbrook Lane, Branson, Missouri. Good evening to all of you. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Nikki Civils. I'm the marketing director at Branson Landing. I want to be respectful of your time, but I also believe it's right to speak on behalf of our ownership and management at Branson Landing regarding this ordinance. As most of you know, we have a summer concert series, and Budweiser is our sponsor for our beer garden at our concerts. Our concerts in beer garden are from 6:30 to 10:30 p.m., and we have 8 concerts from Memorial Weekend through Labor Day weekend. We use the Hilton of Branson's alcohol for the picnic license to serve. We do not serve food with our beer garden. This is our 3rd summer hosting beer gardens, and in 3 years, we've had 0 incidents. We have crowds from 2,000 all the way up to 27,000 on our July 3rd Liberty Light Up. And again, I want to repeat, we have no food being served at our beer garden, and we have had 0 incidents from serving alcohol. It's important that Branson Landing, especially all of Branson, caters to young families that will be coming to Branson for years to come and making great family memories. I believe Disney World is one of the most family-friendly tourist locations in the world, and they also serve alcohol. You don't have to buy a hot dog to drink at any of their parks. Our guests aren't trying to get inebriated at our concerts. They are simply having a drink, sitting on a blanket. Most are watching their kids dance to the music and enjoying their time outside with their families. I want to tell you a quick story about a young couple I met my 2nd summer working at Branson Landing as the marketing director. They got engaged at one of our summer concerts and in front of the fountains. It was very romantic. They each had a beer from our beer garden to celebrate. Then last year in 2020, they came back and they saw me and they were pregnant. The husband had a beer from the beer garden and the wife had an ice cream cone from Kilwins. A couple of weeks ago, they saw me again and they introduced me to their beautiful baby girl. I then bought them each a beer and congratulated them. They had another beer before heading up to their room and they told me, "We'll see you next year." I can't wait to watch this small family of 3 grow. This story has nothing to do with the beer they enjoyed, but everything to do with the memories we want to nurture at Branson Landing. They didn't need food to have an alcoholic beverage, and they didn't need the beer to make the memories, but it's important as a marketing director that I can give couples and families a nice free outing, a free summer concert, and they can relax and enjoy themselves and have a drink if they so choose. I believe we either stay stuck in the old Branson ways, or we can start accommodating memories for all people coming to Branson, from the 20-somethings to the 90-plus. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Any others?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just have a question for Nikki. I believe, isn't Branson Landing a planned development, and that was an allowed use within that planned development? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Critchfield, 1015 Highway 248.
Who? Just kidding.
You walked into that, Steve.
I did. I know this could be an emotional issue. I want to broaden the conversation about the whole liquor license. And I hope that your votes, either tonight or future votes about this issue, aren't from those who are the loudest and or perhaps the most organized to show up the meeting. Because I'm here to talk for the many who are unable and unaware about the issues being discussed tonight, as they are working in their restaurant and serving our guests dinner before their show. I expect to hear that you need to protect Branson's family values, and you need to vote against any of these changes. I want to share some of Branson's family values that I saw on display last year during the shutdown and COVID. Besides commercial brokerage, my company manages a number of commercial properties, and last March we had almost 212 tenants and properties that we managed. A few were national tenants, but over 200 of them were commonly referred to as mom and pop tenants. They're family-owned and operated businesses and several restaurants. The response we received from national tenants were, until further notice, we aren't paying rent. The mom and pop family business called, some in tears, trying to figure out what they could do to survive. Together, my partner and I worked out their plans and then took those plans to the building owners, and next we had to see if the lenders would let us execute those plans. Luckily, our local regional lenders worked with all involved, and we all worked through it, writing some rent off, pushing leases back, PPP money, and working out payment plans. At the end, we only had 3 tenants who didn't and couldn't live up to their commitments. All the others did. They did everything they could to survive. We saw them create other ways to serve their customers while protecting them and their employees. Believe me, I saw a whole lot of family values on display during the year. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a tourist destination. I spent a lot of time this year doing research of our competitors, as well as having some consumer research for a project we are attempting next to the Grand Village. It involves restaurants, several new food concepts, a lot of outdoor seating, possibly a bar or rooftop bar, some retail, and an entertainment element. It's going to be family friendly, but liquor is going to be a part of the offerings. All of our family businesses are competing with Pigeon Forge, Myrtle Beach, Destin, and others, plus St. Louis, Kansas City, and even Springfield. Why do we have to make our local liquor license requirements more draconian than the rest of the state and, frankly, our competitors? Are they more or less virtuous than we are? I don't think so. We look dumb, frankly, as we have to treat our visitors and those who want to invest in this community differently than other cities. As a quick example, I had a hotel operator interested in the long vacant parcel across from the convention center next to the post office. The franchise requires a bar, a restaurant, and a rooftop patio bar. Turns out the developer would have to redesign his building so the bar, restaurant, and rooftop bar could maybe fit at the farthest southeast corner of the building, so they would be more than 300 feet from a church per local requirements, even though the state only requires 100 feet. Of course, depending on how it was measured, if it was to the bar door, to the front door of the hotel, or how it was determined, in any case, he wasn't willing to go through the brain damage. He went to another market. Or maybe the startup churches that call us regularly for a space to hold their services while they build their church attendance. Many of our landlords would be willing to help, but they can't because they put a church in that center. They won't be able to lease to a restaurant who wants to serve wine or beer with a meal. Like those in downtown Springfield, we have a lot of people ask us why we can't have restaurants like that. I tell you to look at the liquor license laws and you'll see why. Who are we trying to protect exactly? Isn't it time that we accept prohibition is dead and we are no better than the rest of the state or the communities who have less restrictive liquor laws? Please look at all our ordinances and let's bring them into this century. If you don't wish to drink, okay, but let's don't stop the town and our family businesses and employees from making a living like our competitors are able to do. Thanks for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay.
I'm State Representative Brian Seitz. I live at 1805 Miller Drive, Branson, Missouri, so the Democrats can come throw eggs at my house.
That was the mayor that did that.
Yeah, okay, I knew it was somebody. Might have been somebody on the board. With this ordinance, I ask, what does it do for the future of Branson, and does it reflect our past and the very reason that we have a unique, successful tourist area? I like the old Branson ways, and I think our visitors that flock to this area like the old Branson ways. That's why they come here. Branson represents God, family, country, and the people like it that way. We are a unique tourist destination. Disney has a brand. I was at Disney World this past weekend, and Branson is branded differently, and we're very successful because of it. People come here because it's Branson and all it stands for. Will this ordinance enhance our area? Will it bring more tourists to the area? It's not about telling businesses what to do. It's not about restricting businesses. It's about the brand and what makes Branson unique. Will we have to change the way Branson is marketed or let visitors be surprised when they get here? Is the demographic that we attempt to reach clamoring for this ordinance to take place, or would a large section of that demographic see this as a negative? I have to ask, does this proposed ordinance represent God, family, and country? You'll have to decide that. Since freeing Branson after the last election, people love coming here again, and we are breaking records. Is it time to mess with success? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Seitz. Jason, anything you want to share?
Board of Aldermen, Jason Altman, President and CEO of Branson Chamber and CVB, 4100 Gretna Road. I have a brief statement, and I guess who better to talk about our brand and our visitor than the gentleman that runs that organization. So I'm here tonight to present on behalf of the Branson Lakes Area Chamber of Commerce and its governing executive committee, which is made up of community leaders from the banking, lodging, theater, attraction, and insurance industries. The BLACC is in support of Bill 6035 and amending Chapter 6 of the Municipal Code. Branson continues to grow as a destination and a favorable place to reside. As our visitor base expands and new visitors come to Branson, along with it comes a new expectation. Our research shows that travelers want to have a local experience involving food and beverage, and this has become a major trend nationally. We already heard earlier from Mr. Critchfield about our competition with Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Wisconsin Dells, Myrtle Beach, those places that already have an open opportunity for their visitors, and they continue to grow each year, and we need to remain competitive against these individuals. These travelers are known as foodies, who show a passion for gourmet fare and a particular interest in beverages handcrafted in the local area. We need to look no further than to see the success of businesses in our area, such as Seven Arrows Tap Room in Hollister and Mother's Brewery in Springfield. Our current and future visitor would welcome these types of businesses in the city, as there is already consumer demand across the country. In addition, this ordinance can contribute to new growth in Branson. There are currently a minimum of 3 proposed multi-million-dollar developments that would benefit from these changes being discussed. The proposed changes will drive our economy, expand our visitor base, and will align with how the state of Missouri already governs. That's on behalf of the Branson Chamber and CVB. I also have 2 written statements here. One on behalf of Cameron and Lee McCarron, the owners of the Branson Helicopter Tours. We are in favor of an amendment to Chapter 6 of Branson Municipal Code on food and alcohol sales. We would like to see the alcohol sales at a business not be dependent on a percentage of food sales. We are in the early stages of a development on our property in Branson, where Branson Helicopter Tours is located, and this amendment would open up more possibilities for future establishments to sell alcohol without being tied directly to food sales. We are confident the amendment would benefit existing establishments such as show theaters, attractions, and movie theaters as well. Your consideration to amend Chapter 6 would be greatly appreciated. The last statement is from Tage Sunder, who is a partner at the Covera Partners. We support the changes to Chapter 6 of Branson Municipal Code Bill Number 6035 regarding food and alcohol sales. Alcohol sales at a business should not be dependent on a percentage of food sold. We are in the preliminary phases of additions to our property in Branson, where Aquarium at the Boardwalk is located. Possibilities for future sales of alcohol without being tied directly to food sales is more in line with many other destinations in America, several of which we have properties in as well. It is our hope the amendment will benefit other pillars of the tourism industry in Branson too. We would appreciate your careful consideration in amending Chapter 6 of Branson Municipal Code Bill Number 6035. Thank you for the service to our community. Again, for the chamber and the constituents that we represent, we're here on behalf of them. Again, this is not an issue that we see that will lead to any type of drunkenness or just bad behavior within the city, but just an opportunity to grow our destination, both as a visitor and from a development opportunity. So thank you for listening tonight.
Thank you, Jason.
Hi, good evening. Do I have a time limit? I
Nope.
just want to make sure.
Well, within reason.
Okay. I just want to make sure I don't go over, so.
Mine.
My name is Marietta Hagan. I live at 210 Loganberry Road in Branson. I'm here tonight speaking as the project coordinator for the Stone and Taney County Substance Use Initiative and part of the leadership team of the Taney County Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Team. I wanted to share some information with you about the history of our ordinance and congratulate the city of Branson on the strides that we have made in protecting our youth from underage alcohol use as a result of that ordinance that has been noted to be a model policy and is often mentioned as a city that has stepped forward to put the youth of their community first. We worked with Community Partnership of the Ozarks to make sure that that ordinance had all of the components in it to support our youth. And so I just wanted to point out some of the graphs. Back in 2008, our compliance check rate was around 22%. So that meant whenever the police department would go out and have someone posing as a youth and try to buy alcohol, only 22% of the time was that youth not able to purchase alcohol. As you can see, over the years since this ordinance...
Excuse me, when they did that, 22% of those appearing to be underage...
were not able to. So that means what?
80 or 78%
were able to purchase alcohol as an underage
clarify
youth.
that. Thank
Yes. So as you can see, the line trends up. And as of, I believe, November of 2019 was the last time the current police officers were able to do the compliance checks due to some COVID precautions, that we were up to a 93% compliance rate, which means that 93% of the time, whenever youth went in to try and purchase alcohol, they were not able to. That is amazing. That has been touted at our state prevention conferences as an amazing change. That's not the only change I want to bring your attention to. The second one, the next three actually are pulled from the Missouri Student Survey, and that is a survey that is given to youth ages or grades 6 through 12 every 2 years throughout the state of Missouri. And this is specifically comparing Taney County youth responses and Missouri youth responses. On the first page, past month alcohol use, the question is something like how many times or have you used alcohol in the past 30 days? The grades down at the bottom represented our 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. You can see which each grade compared from 2006 to 2020, the amount of students that answered that they had used alcohol in the past 30 days dropped significantly in all age groups, right? Does that make sense the way it's looking? Okay. The second graph, lifetime alcohol use, you can see significant drops in those answers as well, showing that less youth are using alcohol. The third graph refers to the perception of enforcement. So that refers kind of to those compliance checks. Do you think that they can get in trouble for trying to purchase alcohol? And you can see that in those cases, the perception of enforcement went up. So currently, what we're doing with the city code ordinance, the way it is, has been working very well. The other thing that I would like to speak to are, I would also like to draw your attention to the document that is titled Alcohol Outlet Density Regulation. That was put together by the leadership team of the Taney County ADAPT group. And basically what we do in our community is we work with the multiple sectors, business, faith, school, city government, to make sure that our community is working to protect our youth from the dangers of underage use and misuse. And so some of the things that I would like to point your attention to on that is that high alcohol density, basically the number of alcohol outlets that are available in a certain square area, is linked to excessive drinking and negative consequences, right? So my understanding of removing the 50% food requirement would make it easier for a certain business to perhaps offer alcohol. Am I correct in that understanding? So if, right now, my understanding is that they have to sell alcohol in order to have the business license. But by amending this ordinance, you would be removing that, and that means that it would almost remove a barrier for them. Is that correct?
I think you meant to use the word food instead of alcohol.
Food, yes, sorry. Sorry. But that's correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So through research, studies show that increased density of alcohol outlets does end up equating to greater availability to youth. It also increases excessive alcohol consumption and related harms, including drunk driving, violence, and other dangerous consequences. Regulating that alcohol density is an effective strategy for reducing alcohol consumption and associated harms. One thing that I thought was interesting in regards to the alcohol density is that when we were looking at the ordinance, or when the group was looking at the ordinance, the density that we have now is actually very high for a community with a population of our size. Now, we are a unique community because we have tourists, and our population grows to larger numbers during the year. But when we're thinking about the youth that live here in our community year-round, we actually have a very high ratio of our population to alcohol outlet density. Even though we have these great strides being made with alcohol use by underage youth, I would like to let you know that the most recent 2020 Missouri Student Survey that I was speaking of earlier had a couple numbers that I wanted to make you aware of. The first one is that our past 30-day use of alcohol by youth is still at 11.6%, which is still a significant number. Typically in prevention, anything over 10% should be considered a priority topic to address within a community. So alcohol is still one of Taney County ADAPT's main focuses. The second number that I would call your attention to is that the perception of harm. So this question asks students if they have a no perception or a slight risk if they drink alcohol. So basically 37.5% of the students that answered said that there was no risk or a very slight risk. So that speaks to how we portray alcohol and how the community norms around alcohol translate to our students, because 37% of them think drinking is not risky. The final number I would call your attention to is 44.4% of our youth here in Taney County specifically think that it is very easy or sort of easy to get alcohol in our community. Now that's through a variety of ways, but again, this ordinance was a comprehensive model and all of the pieces play together. Alcohol use by persons
Marietta,
under...
on that last point you just made, what percentage was that?
44.4% of youth think it is very easy or sort of easy to get alcohol.
Okay, I just wanted to point out something that previously on the chart, you showed that the
compliance checks?
The compliance checks were running at 93%.
Yes.
So that doesn't sound like that's a source they're getting.
So this one is perception of availability. So this is what the youth are thinking.
Got
So
it.
whether it's coming from a bar, whether they're going in and trying to purchase alcohol, or maybe they think it's easy to get it from a friend or from their parents' liquor cabinet.
Yeah.
So it includes a lot of different things.
Thank you.
I actually have a lot of research here
Yeah,
that I would love to share with you.
Could you maybe summarize? I just want to respect everybody else's
No,
time.
I understand that. What I would really ask today is that when we heard about this change, this proposed change, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. We didn't know that it was happening, and I would just really ask for you guys to take more time to consider this ordinance change and how it impacts the youth of our county. I'm not really sure how all of the mechanisms work at the city level, but if there is an opportunity to meet with you one-on-one, our Taney County ADAPT leadership team would be happy to provide you with a lot more evidence-based research that shows that increased access to alcohol for youth is dangerous. And I would hate to see something that we've come so far in addressing start taking steps back. And by removing that food sales requirement, it would make it easier for other businesses to have alcohol, which does increase that potential for youth to have increased access and negative consequences. So,
Marietta, thank you very much.
thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Josie Velasco, and I live at 1600 Bird Road, number 132 in Branson. And I would like to address this proposed change as a probably not such a good idea. I first came to Branson about 2 or 3 years ago, and I wasn't here but 6 months when I realized the degree of alcoholism, oppression, poverty, and drug use that was current here. And I think that I agree with the last speaker that it's a step that you really want to look at in the long term. I understand so many of the businesses, it's easy money, but that's all it is. It's just money. And people might want to come to Branson for a different kind of experience where they don't have to drink all the time and model that in front of their children to have a good time, is that you have to have alcohol. I think that we can afford to be different, and I am much more active and concerned in bringing a culture of life to Branson than to move backwards in the other direction. So I would really hesitate on that, because it's just another move in the wrong direction that we're just barely beginning to be able to recover from. I would really like to see a lot more culture of life, and also the tourism is a very nice thing to have because it brings a whole lot of basically free money, sort of, kind of. But there's also a community here. And if you're wanting to bring families here, you want to have that community strength and the community options. There's all kind of opportunities for other businesses here. We don't have any lab tests anywhere time, and there's just all kind of sports and business. Every time I talk to somebody, they're like, yeah, I wish somebody would open up one of those here. So I would agree with developing Branson, but I would not agree with the alcohol thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie.
Here comes Pearl.
Pearl Haining, 1440 State Highway 248, Branson. It hasn't changed. I wanted to speak on this, not because I have a strong opinion, but because I don't. I come to this issue with a very divided perspective. I'm a huge proponent of free market. I'm a huge proponent of government being less restrictive. I'm also a huge proponent of representative government. And from my experience in the music industry, I'm also a huge proponent of strong and unique branding. And so I can relate to a lot of the different perspectives that have already been presented tonight. And it leaves me rather conflicted. Somebody mentioned the comparison between Branson and Pigeon Forge. And that's definitely realistic to an extent. But when I think of a comparison for Branson in this regard, my mind goes not to Pigeon Forge, but to Nashville. And I'm guessing Clay can relate a little bit to that spectrum. Nashville is not only famous, but infamous for its bars. And in over 15 years in the music industry, I visited Nashville only a couple of times, and that was on purpose, mostly because of how unappealing it was to me. And I would come home to Branson and be totally refreshed. And I know that from my years in the music industry, I have personally brought many people to Branson who said, we're going to go visit Branson. We're going to go visit Pearl's family. They referred to us as the Hainings. And they would never consider visiting Nashville. Never. On the other hand, as I said, I am a proponent of less restrictive government, a huge proponent of free market, being able to do what free market does, which kind of involves the freedom to do what you want to do. But also taking into account that we are a representative government. Hearing so much conflict and tension on this issue, is it something that we have to decide within 2 weeks of it first being proposed? Can we step back and say, yeah, we hear what the CVB is saying. This definitely would be good for industry and growth. Yeah, we hear what folks are saying about wanting to protect our youth from more access to alcohol. Yeah, we hear what folks are saying about wanting to promote an aspect in an area of life and joy. And I understand that some people may find joy in alcohol. But knowing what I know of the Branson community already, a lot of people also find darkness and oppression in it. And so I am very conflicted on this issue. And I can't say that I'm in favor or against it. But I can say that maybe it would be wise to postpone it, table it, revisit it somehow.
Pearl, thank you very much.
Kevin Huddleston, 300 Grand Avenue. Ms. Pearl, that's very insightful. I appreciate your comments. Thank you all for the opportunity to address this. I will be very brief. I think it is a branding issue more than anything else. Our community is unique. Some people have decried the family values argument or the legacy that we have as being old-fashioned. And perhaps it is, but it makes us unique. We don't have to be just like every other community. If people want to be just like every other community, there's plenty of opportunities to visit them if you want. We supposedly receive 8 million visitors a year. It's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but everybody exaggerates the same way, so it's comparative. But if that's true, that's only 2% of the US population. I think there's a whole lot of people who appreciate the niche that Branson has carved out. And if we start diluting that and trying to be all things to all people, where's our niche go? Where's our brand go? I'm very disappointed in the chamber position that says, yeah, we recognize that Branson was built on a legacy of family values, but we really think we ought to be more like everybody else. That's wrong-headed thinking, I believe. So I would say, along with Marietta and with Ms. Pearl, This is an issue that needs to be studied a little further. I would appreciate the opportunity for the city to hear from the public directly through a public hearing at a meeting farther down the line, so we can fully examine this issue and not pass it on a 2-week hurried-up basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Gary Groman, 350 South Wildwood Drive, Branson. Am I correct that all we're proposing to do is put our ordinance in compliance with the state ordinance by removing the food requirement? We're not changing the world. I just want to make sure. And am I basically correct that the licenses that we're expanding are primarily for light wine and beer?
Attorney LeBeck, would you address those?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor, and I know there may be some questions with regards to state licensing. I did prepare a presentation, and I can go through that so we can see what the state licensing requirements are if the board's wanting to see that. But otherwise, Mr. Groman hits the nail directly on the head.
Twice. Oh, wait. Well, quit on my head. No.
And you can write that down, Mr. Groman.
It's a big day.
Folks, how many people decide whether or not they're going to go on vacation on whether or not the destination they're going to sells alcohol? Now, I must admit, I occasionally drink a beer, and I have occasionally been drunk. But they're far and in between, and it has never been while I've been on vacation with my family. I just can't picture that impacting us at all, that we are putting our ordinances in compliance with the state ordinances, and we're removing the food requirement. What was amazing to me is how excited everybody was when we had mandatory masking for COVID. We got to let people have freedom to make choice. Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to remove a restriction to give people the freedom to make a choice. But I guess it depends on who's goring your ox, doesn't it? Folks, as long as it's just bringing us in compliance with the state ordinance, I don't see where it's going to impact us one iota. And yes, we can hold studies and we can debate, and what we'll probably end up with is, hey, we're just complying with the state law. We're doing the same thing that just about everybody else is doing. And I don't think Branson's economy depends one iota on whether or not, well, maybe one iota, but that's in terms of a million iotas. But on whether or not we amend our liquor ordinances to permit the flexibility of businesses to decide whether or not they want to sell alcoholic beverages, particularly light beer and wine, and particularly let our guests decide whether or not they want to go into those businesses and partake. Does anybody up there really believe it's going to change Branson? If this ordinance change is going to change Branson, then we got a bigger problem than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Mr. Mayor, if there's more speakers, that's fine, but I think the presentation might be good for, I mean, I don't know if you want to do it now. After the speakers are done.
I think that's a great suggestion. Are there any more speakers? Your timing is good, Alderman Cooper.
He's been goaded.
Well, that might clear up some questions.
Chad, is this the new clicker? All right, I put this together this afternoon because based on some of the feedback the city has gotten on this, I think there's been some confusion between what constitutes intoxicating liquor. We heard beer, we heard light wine, and we've heard liquor, okay? Let's see if I can make this thing work. All right, so this is what the state does today. So what does a by the drink license mean? It's for consumption of an intoxicating beverage on the licensed premises. So state issues a license, I can drink that intoxicating liquor on the premises of the business. So how does the state regulate intoxicating liquor? They put it into, and I apologize for the typo, put this together kind of quickly, spirits, wine, and beer. Liquor, those three categories. So 3 main types of by the drink licenses. There are others, but these are the general big 3, if you will. Okay, the first is a beer by the drink license. And what this license at the state level allows, it allows retailers to serve beer by the drink for consumption on the licensed premises. This license allows retailers to operate between the hours of 6 a.m. and 1:30 on weekdays and Saturdays, and between the hours of 9 a.m. and midnight on Sunday. And then you have your statutory reference. So beer by the drink license. One observation to make, the city code has different hours, okay? And I won't go through all that detail because that's outside the scope of the change today. But again, the state has that set hours, the city has different in certain contexts. Okay, so that's the first type of license. The second is at the state level, a beer and light wine by the drink license. This license allows retailers to serve beer and light wine by the drink for consumption on the licensed premises. Again, same hours, same statute. Okay, so this is a second type of license. The third type of license.
Excuse me, I just wanted to point out, including all election days.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That's a key point.
Just wanted to point it out.
For some reason, the state wanted that in there. Okay, the third type is what's called a retail by the drink license, and this includes all 3 categories: wine, beer, and spirits. And this license allows retailers to serve all categories of intoxicating liquor by the drink for consumption on the premises, even on election days. Okay? I think this is the one that has people concerned. Again, just hearing some of the feedback, seeing some of the emails that have come through the city. So, I want to go through what the application process looks like. For those of us that have never had the opportunity to have to apply for a state liquor license, our state right now has 14 documented requirements. These are things you have to present to the state of Missouri to get a license to serve intoxicating liquor, one of those 3 licenses. You have such fun things as, number 9, a photo of yourself, that you can't have sunglasses or a hat on, Alderman Cooper, okay? You have to have a photo of the location where you're gonna do this. You have to show that your business is current on all taxes. You have to be registered to vote, okay? There are 14 requirements. Most important down there, I would say, is probably the health department inspection. So again, these are the rules and the regulations just generally that a license seeker has to go through at the state level before they'll even consider you. Okay, you have to submit this with your application. Now, what about a retail by the drink license? Again, spirits, wine, and beer. We're not talking wine and beer, but we're talking all 3. Bottom line is this is not allowed in Branson at the state level unless you are a resort or a restaurant, okay? We can't have bars in Branson. Why? And this is maybe a little bit hard to see, but this is actually a flow chart that the state of Missouri put together, Department of Public Safety, on this topic. This goes through, can I have this license, okay? The key point here is item number 5. And let's see here. Item number 5, right there. Has the city held a ballot election to vote in liquor by the drink? As I said in the first meeting, went back to 1934, that's never happened. So because of that, the only way that a business can serve liquor by the drink, spirits, wine, and beer together, is they have to comply as a resort. This is where our state liquor law gets a little confusing, okay? There's a few different opportunities to do this. You can be a resort under 6A. You have 30 rooms for overnight accommodations. This is the interesting one. A restaurant without lodging where food is habitually furnished, in which the establishment's annual gross receipts immediately preceding the application for the license was at least $75,000 per year, with at least $50,000 in gross receipts from non-alcohol. So the food requirement is built in at the state level already. The city of Branson level, we're at 200,000 and 50%. At the state level, if I want to do spirits, I want to do the full kitty, I have to comply with that requirement or be a resort or one of the other exceptions. So, what did this ultimately boil down to? We have an additional municipal requirement on the books that basically says if you want to serve a beer in city limits, you got to serve a hot dog. I mean, it's really that simple. That's the policy decision before the board. I have profound respect for Marietta. We do a lot of things together, and she brings some very valid points to the board. But again, this is just talking, as Mr. Groman said, food. That's all it is. And as you can see, there's already a pretty significant framework, where did it go, Chad, at the state level. Thank you.
With that presentation, I would like to ask if anybody in the audience had any questions for what Chris just presented for clarity. You got that? Hot dog, beer. Are there any comments from the board?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Last meeting's agenda had 27 items on the agenda. We did not have this presentation at our last meeting. 27 items is a lot of items for the board to go through, let alone our citizens. So I think that this item went through very quickly. There was not enough information, I don't feel, for our citizens. I oppose the measure for 3 basic reasons. I appreciate Alderman Cooper passing on this concern from a business owner in the area. He passed it on, just like whenever someone brings something to any one of us, we pass the information on so that your voice can be heard. And I believe there's a lot more added to this ordinance change in the drafting process than the simple request that the business owner had originally conveyed. It seems that it's a bit open-ended. I understand that we were advised by city staff that not everyone will be able to get a liquor license, but I still think that the changes being made are too broad. I don't want to see a free-for-all, but I don't think there's just been enough education or discussion. And most importantly, I did hear from a lot of people in my ward, and when I ran, I promised to listen to voices. And for that very reason, I'd like to move that we postpone this item for further discussion so that everyone has an opportunity to hear the facts so that they can make an educated decision or make educated comments when they come up to speak at the board.
Is that a motion to be acted on, Madam Clerk?
Are you making that as an actual motion?
Yes.
And do you want to make to a date certain, or how long?
I don't really know. 30 days? 30 days, I would like to move that we
If we could
postpone
go
this for
to
30
a,
days.
if we could go to a specific date, a board date, I can get you there. This is the 10th, so September 14th would be a date, or 28th.
September 28th. I believe that would allow
So,
ample time.
Madam Clerk, would you read back the motion, please?
We have a motion to postpone this item to September 28th, 2021.
Do I hear a second? Hearing no second, the motion dies. Any other alderman wishing to share?
Mr. Mayor, I woke up in Vegas today with Gary Groman. Gary and I butted heads for 20, 30 years, and we've been friends, and I'm glad to see him back in here. Very glad to see you back in here. But I agree with him. Let the free market do what it's going to do. We've discussed this ever since I've been 20 years of age, and I turned 68 in 2 weeks. I think it's been thoroughly discussed. I did have a long discussion with Craig Westcott today and Chuck O'Day. They're heavily for this thing. I am heavily for it. I think it's time that we bring ourselves in compliance with what state law is, and I don't see that's going to have a significant impact, but I do agree with Marietta on a couple of things. Our issue with getting police out there to do the work that they need to do to make sure that minors are not buying alcohol should be strengthened, no question. And I thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, as Ruth said, or Alderman Denham said, when I got the email asking about this, I simply forwarded it to the people that you're supposed to forward it to. I'm kind of like Pearl on this. I mean, as the ordinance is now, I could have been selling alcohol in my theater for the last 11, 12 years. I mean, because I have hot dogs and nachos and popcorn and all that, and I choose not to. No particular reason. We just choose not to sell beer and wine. Andy Williams Theater's been selling beer and wine for a long time. Legends in Concert, they sell beer and wine. I really don't, and I'm not even a drinker. I'll have a glass of wine on New Year's Eve, and if I'm on the beach in Mexico or something, but that's about it. So I don't see this having a big impact or changing the dynamic of Branson or changing the culture of Branson or the Cal Ripken Little League World Series is going on at Ballparks of America. We sponsored a team. There's 500 kids and teams from all over the globe out there, and 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds. And I was over there at 4 o'clock today, went in and got a bottle of water, and you can buy hot dogs and popcorn. There's several kinds of beer and wine, and there's 15 little kids in front of me. They don't even, I mean, my point is that's one of the most family-friendly places you could go is a ballpark full of kids, and they sell beer and wine. If this thing gets amended or it doesn't get amended, I'm not selling beer and wine at the Clay Cooper Theater. So that's my preference. But also, people that would like to, I think they should have that same preference to choose if they want to sell it or not as well. I mean, it all comes back to, that was the mask thing. I thought people should have the choice to wear a mask or not wear a mask, and that's what I fought for. I haven't heard a big outcry from people. I had 3 emails opposed to this. I had 1 email for it, and I had 3 phone calls for it. So I really don't, I don't think by changing this, amending this, that it's going to turn 76 Country Boulevard into Bourbon Street. I mean, that ain't going to happen. I mean, if I'm correct, you still can't get you're not buying beers on the street, and you're not walking in and out and walking down the sidewalk in front of the Titanic drinking. I mean, that doesn't change, this doesn't change that, am I correct? I mean, okay. It's still a personal responsibility, whether that place sells a beer without nachos or they sell a beer with nachos. It comes down to the person that's drinking the beer. Are you going to have too many and act a fool? Or are you going to have 1 or 2 and have fun? I don't think the nachos with or without nachos changes that, really. I mean, I'm just, I think that was. Yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say. I don't.
You just have to love the way Alderman Cooper shares an opinion.
Well, I just don't see it changing the dynamic of the town, because as it is right now, if people really want to sell beer and wine, then they're going to go get some nachos and a hot dog. And now they don't have to. And I really don't see that many more people just going, oh, they got rid of the food and everybody in town's going to start selling beer and wine. I just don't see it changing the dynamic that much, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Alderman Cooper.
I just wanted to point out that late this afternoon before I left, I got the call from Alderman Fenton, and he wanted me to relay to you that he does support moving this thing forward, and I told him that I would, at the appropriate time, tell you that. That's it.
Any other alderman?
Yeah, so I think, Clay, good comments there. A lot of comments out here that were great. When we get these staff reports, they always refer to the 2030 plan, and this one comes under economic growth. So I've seen this issue in this town where a lot of people were deterred to doing things because they couldn't add this component without the food. Golf simulator came to mind, and a bowling alley that didn't want to do food. So they moved on somewhere else. So this has been an issue in this town for a long time. I think it's good for the, good for the city. It's good for the, the business owner, and it gives everybody a choice as to what they want to do. So I support this.
Any other alderman? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance. I say we vote. Let's vote. We need to get that Jeopardy music, don't we?
The motion carries 4-1 with Alderman Denham voting no, Alderman Gaines voting yes, Alderman Cooper voting yes, Alderman Whitus voting yes, and Alderman C voting yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Move on to item 15.
Your Honor, the next item is the final reading of Bill Number 6036, an ordinance amending Chapter 58, Section 38, the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to failure to identify to a police officer. The floor is open for a motion to approve the final reading of Bill Number 6036.
We have a motion and a second. We'll now have a staff report from Chris Lebec.
I don't have any further comments, Alderman, so I'm happy to answer
This
questions.
was brought down from consent for discussion. Anybody in the audience would like to address this?
State Representative Brian Seitz, 1805 Miller Drive. If you don't succeed, try again. So this is my second try. All right. This deals with the issue of stop ID laws, and it's Bill 6036. It's an ordinance amending Chapter 58, Section 38 of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to failure to identify to a police officer. I read that today, and I read the state statute as well. Current state law is this. A person commits an offense if he intentionally refuses to give his name, residence, address, or date of birth to a police officer who has lawfully arrested the person and requested that information. That is the current statute, and I am in agreement with the current code. The new ordinance would allow for a citizen to be charged with a misdemeanor before being lawfully arrested if he refused to self-identify. It's my contention that the 4th and 5th constitutional amendments come into play and that a person should be secure in his person. And yes, I've read the Supreme Court 5-4 decision authored by Justice Kennedy, and I disagree with that ruling. A couple of years ago, I may have been somewhat in favor of this proposed ordinance, but due to recent history and government's continued overreach involving individual citizen rights, I think this puts us on a slippery slope. At this time, we have an excellent police force. They know by my legislative activity that I support them like no other legislator in the Missouri House. But let's look 20 years down the road. when individual liberties could be further restricted and we end up with a few police officers that may be bad apples. If this ordinance is put in place, it could affect our neighbors, friends, and children negatively years down the road. Current law allows for reasonable suspicion, but also protects individual citizens' rights. I think this ordinance removes those rights. If we put in the ordinance, we are again chipping away at our rights and the very rights that you were elected to protect. I encourage you to side with freedoms and liberties of your constituents and not make it an offense to simply not identify yourself. It's one more loss of individual freedom. I have to ask, who is coming up with these current ordinances? 2 weeks ago, it was said, and I may be paraphrasing, if you haven't done anything wrong and you're involved, if this ordinance passes, you can still go to court and prove your innocence. That's a horrid policy because you haven't done anything wrong. So why do you have to go to court to prove your innocence? We don't need to jam up our court systems with people who haven't done anything wrong. We've seen too much of this lately, and it needs to stop. Last weekend, I spent a few days in Florida with the Young Americans for Liberty organization. It was exactly this type of ordinance that we discussed, the curtailing of individual liberties, and bite by bite, American citizens are losing their freedoms. I support the current police force, but I believe this new ordinance would give them an unnecessary power, taking away a right from the citizens that visit our area. I'm very concerned about this ordinance and the restriction that it provides for individual citizens' freedom and liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Seitz.
Well, I'm still Pearl Haining, and my address is still 1440 State Highway 248, Branson. I concur with Representative Seitz that it's important to support our police, and I very much value their presence in our community and the work that they do. However, I am very concerned about this proposed change to this ordinance. For several reasons. As I look at this ordinance, the first thing that popped out to me is it goes through a summary of the Supreme Court case, which held that a statute requiring suspects to disclose their names due to a valid Terry stop does not violate Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights if and only if the statute first requires reasonable suspicion of criminal involvement. And then this ordinance goes on to say that the Board of Aldermen has determined that amendments are necessary based on a Supreme Court case in 2004. I've heard several times that the members of this board are busy individuals that have busy lives besides just showing up for 5-hour meetings twice a month. I find it hard to believe that the Board of Aldermen was sitting around discussing 2004 Supreme Court cases and found that this was necessary to amend. So I find that doubtful and personally untruthful. I'm not sure why anyone on this board would vote yes on something that specifically includes language that is a lie, if I'm correct in these assumptions. The second thing that that I like to point out on this is the use of the term Terry stop in this Supreme Court citation. Is anyone on this board familiar with the term Terry stop?
Terry versus Ohio.
Okay. What would you summarize it as meaning? Okay. A Terry stop, based on what I've read, mostly refers to a traffic stop. The language in this proposed amendment gives no indication of a traffic stop and is therefore kind of irrelevant to the Supreme Court case being cited. Also, the Supreme Court case being cited says that this kind of an exception could only be permitted if the statute specifically requires reasonable suspicion of criminal involvement. The phrase, upon request when lawfully detained by the officer, gives no indication that criminal involvement is suspected or involved at all. The phrase proposed in this amendment is completely arbitrary. And again, making this irrelevant based on the specifications given in this Supreme Court citation. Now, I would like to mention a couple of practical examples where I would personally find this to be a very bad idea. Because it opens the door to arbitrary detainment, which, by the way, detainment is very hard to define. So that's adding arbitrary to arbitrary. But this would propose that any officer can ask for ID for any reason, just because he feels like asking about it. If a person is going for a jog, has no ID on them, and somebody decides that they look suspicious or they don't want people jogging in their neighborhood, calls the police detains them, requires an ID that they don't have, now they're susceptible to a citation and have to go to court because they were going for a jog with absolutely no intent of malice. Suppose somebody is coming home from a night shift. They work at Cox Hospital, they get home at 3 in the morning and their screen door is jammed. They're standing outside of their own home after working at the hospital. They can't get in because the screen door is jammed. They're just trying to jiggle the door so that they can get in and go to bed. And someone drives by in a squad car and says, somebody's trying to break in. They're trying to go into their own home. They're standing there with the key that fits the lock. But if the officer is having a bad night or just needs to get some citations because he's trying to bring in money for the city or something, albeit I don't think that that's the character of the Branson police force, but we have to be careful that we're not opening the door for unrestricted government overlording. Somebody can be going into their own home and get a citation in the middle of the night. Talk about a bad way to end your night. And on a personal note, as a musician, we performed all over the country, sometimes in big venues and small venues. And I remember as a band, because of safety reports, our band personally chose to drive a Mercedes Sprinter because they have the best safety ratings in the market. And we got pulled over specifically because we were driving a Mercedes late at night. Now, that person who pulled us over had already run our plates, knew exactly who we were. But if they came up and asked for an ID, and we said, "I'm sorry, no, what have we done?" they could hand us a citation now just because we were driving a Mercedes and had done nothing wrong. That's blatant discrimination. And this opens the door wide for that to happen. Now, as alderman, your authority comes, although Representative Seitz refers to, and this Supreme Court case refers to the Fourth and Fifth Amendments of the United States Constitution's Bill of Rights. As alderman, you are sworn to uphold the state constitution and the laws of the state of Missouri. And the state constitution clearly states that all political power is vested in and derived from the people, founded upon their will only. All persons have a natural right to life and liberty. All persons have a natural right to freedom of speech and can say or not say, right? Because you can't have one without the other. If I choose to say my name, if I choose to say my first name, I can also choose not to say my last name, or I can choose not to say either at all. Freedom of speech also requires freedom of non-speech. And the state constitution clearly defines that no person shall be deprived of life or liberty without due process of law. Now, without having any warrant, because there is no probable cause for suspicion and no way to prove that, because you're just doing this on a whim, that is the essence of being deprived of liberty without due process of law. And in this ordinance, you are proposing to directly violate the state constitution.
Excuse me, Pearl. This is obviously a very important decision. I would request that our staff address some of the concerns that you brought up.
Sure, I'm happy to. Let me start with one thing real quick, and this is going to tie into what Pearl said and also Representative Seitz. State law already has a similar law on the books, okay? In Chapter 84, 84.710, the state of Missouri in 1979 passed a similar law just for the city of Kansas City. Style of that law is police force officers of the state powers to arrest, and in that it says they shall also have the power to stop any person abroad whenever there is reasonable ground to suspect that he is committing, has committing, or is about to commit a crime. Again, that's our reasonable suspicion standard. That's what we discussed about intimately last time. And this is the relevant part. So again, this is already on the books today. It's valid. Our courts have already had a ruling on this. It was challenged in 1972 in State v. Rankin. And it says, and I quote, demand of him his name, address, business abroad, and whither he is going. And the word whither is kind of unique. So this is already a state law here in the state of Missouri. It's only applicable to Kansas City and the Kansas City Police Department because they have a little bit different form of a police department because they operate under a police commission. So again, this has already been challenged on those type of grounds, constitutional and otherwise, and it's permissible. Now, the hierarchy of laws, okay, let's talk about this for a second. Overarching, United States Constitution, then federal law, and then state law, and then municipal law. So again, I'm really trying to paraphrase here, but our federal courts, and specifically our United States Supreme Court, said that this is permissible, okay? It's permissible to the point, in fact, that about 25 states have a similar law on the books, and I'm including Missouri in that because we have it as to Kansas City. It's never been extended beyond that. So again, I look at this, and I'm looking at this through the lens of a prosecutor. Chief Matthews can look at this through the lens of a police officer. This is simply a tool to allow our officers to investigate potential criminal activity. Again, I go back to our own statute that he is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a crime. Reasonable suspicion. This isn't a situation where we're just stopping cars or stopping people on the side of the street and saying, hey, what's your ID? And then writing a ticket to generate revenue. Our municipal court loses significant amount of money each year. It is a public safety cost, okay? There's no revenue there. So to make that point, I think, is misguided a bit. But the bottom line is this is a tool for law enforcement to help them do their job better when they see criminal activity is afoot. And this is viewed under this kind of totality of the circumstances. That's what the court keeps focusing on. And I know Mr. Dobbins has a couple stories that he can share on this with regards to his own personal experience. I know Chief Matthews does as well as A. Chief Smith. And I saw Lieutenant Jones as well shake his head a couple times throughout this. So again, I don't want to speak for any of our law enforcement officers, but I believe they can probably articulate some of these points better. But the bottom line under the law, under our Missouri Constitution, is 100% permissible.
My greatest concern in this is that there is no language, there is no restrictions to define grounds for suspicion in this ordinance. And it is completely open-ended. It really is. And I think that that's dangerous ground because I've personally experienced it.
So Mr. Mayor, you're looking at me.
Yep.
So to that point, the ordinance is crafted under the lawful detention standard. So what's a lawful detention? Okay? There's an arrest and there's a detention. Okay? Law enforcement can temporarily detain somebody, okay? One such example of that is a Terry stop. That's when there's a pat down for weapons. That's not what this is. This is not stop and frisk, okay? They can do that already today without any city ordinance, okay? That's well established. So again, the standard is built into the statute by the term lawful detention. So lawful detention can be reasonable suspicion like we talked about last time. It can be probable cause, or it can actually be somebody in the commission of an act, okay? So any of those three pieces fall under this lawful detention umbrella. And as a result of that, the question goes, who are you, what are you doing? And it's at that point that triggers this ordinance. Because again, how is a law enforcement officer able to do his job if he can't effectively identify the person where criminal activity is afoot? That's the fundamental problem here. That's what we are trying to address at the city level so that our officers can be efficient and effective in their application of public safety here in the community. Really that simple.
Thank you. Thank you, Pearl.
I don't come down here to make trouble. I just
know,
want to understand. And not seeing any language restricting that in the bill, I scoured the state statutes today trying to find a definition of lawful detainment, and I couldn't. So I appreciate that clarification. And
Mr. Mayor, if you would like, I am happy to visit with Pearl at any time. I know, for example, on the prior agenda item, Mr. Huddleston came in and we talked at length about the state liquor licensing. So if Pearl wants to, I'm happy to sit down, go through this with you in detail, and give you some paper to support kind of the position of the city, because again, the city is recommending this, staff, to help you, if you would like.
thank you.
And I can say that when the board is presented with an ordinance with the legalese in it, and if it gets approved, if it's determined that a part of it was found to be illegal, then we'll make changes. Thank you, Pearl.
Gary Roman, 350 South Wildwood Drive, Branson, Missouri. I apologize. I was on my way out, and then I heard Representative Seitz talking about it. This is nuts. Does anybody really believe that our police officers are just going to stop people for no reason to get their name and address? How much effort does it take to give somebody to identify yourself? I mean, this is crazy. Our police officers have a hard enough time doing their job. In the example that Pearl just gave, now she kind of cherry-picked the facts. The woman was in her house. The door was stuck. Police officer comes up. Would you want a police officer to walk up and help her get in her house without asking for some identification in that particular situation? I mean, folks, we're not persecuting anybody. 20 years down the pike, a lot of things are going to change. But right now, it's a pretty simple issue. Can the police officers ask for identification? And do you have to give them identification if they ask for it? I have no problem with that, and I hope you don't either. I mean, this is nuts.
Thank you, Gary. Anybody else in the audience wishing to speak? He didn't call us nuts, did he?
I think so.
Any members of the board have comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I thank Pearl Haining and our representative Brian Seitz and Mr. Groman for coming up, voicing their concerns. I agree very much with Ms. Haining and with our representative Seitz. We can already, officers can already ask for identification if someone doesn't want to identify themselves and they truly feel they're going to commit a crime or there's reasonable suspicion, they can detain them, they can arrest them. That can already take place. I sought legal counsel regarding the legality of this amendment. And after a very quick review, he was able to determine that this is actually setting up the city of Branson for some future lawsuits. He wanted to be able to be here tonight to speak and was unable to, and I believe it would behoove the city to make sure that we are protecting ourselves if there is a concern out there. And I therefore move to postpone this item to the September 14th meeting to allow further discussion on this item before making such a huge decision that could put us in a not very good situation.
Madam Clerk, would you read the motion back, please?
We have a motion to postpone to the September 14th, 2021 meeting.
Do I hear a second? Hearing none, motion failed. Any other alderman wishing to share?
Yes, sir, just run down the pike here. As the son of a first sergeant of military police that had 30 years' experience, I was always taught an officer asks you something, it's yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And if they ask you for an ID, you give it to them. I don't see this violating any rights whatsoever. Clay and I talked about this the other day, to be able to illustrate that. And Chief, help me out here. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and Clay and I are back there behind Whitewater with a screwdriver in our hand, try to break into a building. And the officer comes up to it and says, tells me, who are you and what are you doing with that screwdriver in your hand? Identify yourself. It's not catching Clay and I walk down Highway 76 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon enjoying the track or something. I think there's two totally different things, and I do trust in the judgment of the Branson Police and the management of that system to properly implement this. I'm not going to call anybody crazy. People just have different opinions on stuff. I wholeheartedly come down on the side that this is legal. It's been vetted through our legal department. It has been recommended by the Branson Police, and that's enough for me.
Well, I have zero experience as a police officer, obviously. So I'm going to lean on the police department, you know, and I'm assuming, we could ask the assistant chief or the lieutenant or the chief, but in a situation like that, by asking for identification, I'm assuming that helps expedite the situation, right? Could the assistant chief or somebody just, because again, I don't know nothing about copping, but I know that what Bill said is very true. When I was a kid, they always said, you know, if a cop asks you a question, it's yes, sir, no, sir, and you just, never in a million years, if a cop's come up and said, what's your name, boy, would I say, I don't have to tell you. I just wouldn't do that.
Hood and Tame asked me again, I'd tell you the same.
Because if I did that, I would feel like I must be hiding something. And I totally agree with Representative Seitz about people's freedoms and protecting that. But I also support the police, and if the police are saying this is going to help them do their job, then I have to believe that that's the truth. So if I've had a few break-ins in my parking lot at my theater. A lady they busted out a window during the show, stole her purse. She had $800 cash in there. She had 3 or 4 kids. The guy's a preacher and his wife, and they never found the guy. But if let's say that happened, and my parking lot guy says, "Hey, there's a guy back here walking around with a crowbar. He looks suspicious. He's got a hoodie on. He's kind of zooming in and out of the vehicles, and the lady just had her van window broke." If you showed up if I called the cops and you showed up and you said, "What's your name? What are you doing here?" And he said, "I don't have to tell you nothing," and then the guy walks off, I'd be ticked as that property owner. That I'd be like, well, 99%, that's the guy. He's got a tool in his hand, the window's broken, he's zooming around in the dark. I'm just trying to think common sense here. I don't want nobody's freedoms infringed upon, but I also want the cops to be able to do their job. And if you guys are saying that helps, I also have to believe that you are good cops. And that's why you hire these people, because you believe that you've hired the best people that are going to make the best decisions and enforce the law to their best ability. So if this gives them an opportunity to do things that they shouldn't do, then we don't have the right guys. You know what I'm saying? So I guess my question was, if you walk up to somebody in that scenario like I just mentioned, by asking them their identification, what's your name, what are you doing here, does that help expedite the situation from the very get-go of the situation?
A couple of comments, if I could. Thank you for your comments about the character of the men and women of the Branson Police Department. All of us appreciate those comments. And we try every day to live up to your standards. One of the things about reasonable suspicion we really haven't talked about, the courts hold that standard to an objective reasonableness standard through the eyes of a trained, educated, all of that professional police officer. So my conduct is judged through the eyes of all the other
police officer's conduct, right? So when I make that stop, that's the standard that the courts hold us to. So to your point, past, present, or future offenses, your question, will the name expedite that? If we make that contact, we don't find evidence of a crime right now, but I have the name, that person walks away, 10 minutes later, we find evidence of a crime, now I have a link back to that crime.
Paper trail.
Yes.
So I'm assuming Pearl's examples of like the jogger and the hospital worker, I mean, I get her point, and those are great examples, but when you say that's maybe an extreme, I mean, I can't imagine our officers overstepping their boundaries of the law and doing something like, I mean, there's good cops, there's bad cops. We all know that, you know, there's good and bad in every profession. Again, I still think it goes back to when you guys do your due diligence, that word. What is it called?
Due diligence.
Yeah, that you guys are cherry picking the best of the best, and you trust that that's not going to happen with these officers, right? I mean.
Yes, sir. And with all due respect for all the comments that have been made, I haven't been an officer as long as Mr. Dobbins, but in my almost 37 years of wearing a uniform, have I seen cops that have made decisions like you're talking about? Yes, but I've seen far more on the other side because of the standards that not only you hold us to, but the courts hold us to, right? And we do everything we can to make it an objective reasonableness standard that we live by. Can I talk to anybody I want? Yes, but they don't have to talk to me. But when I meet that reasonable suspicion standard, now I can legally detain them to investigate past, present, and future criminal offenses. And that's granted by the courts. We have that authority right now. What this ordinance is asking for is for the identification piece. It's another tool in the toolbox to make Branson a safer place.
Yeah, the only reason that question would ever be asked, or should ever be asked, is if something seems suspicious, and that's the reason, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean,
Yes, sir.
again, I ain't never done this, but I'm just leaning on what I see, all their heads shaking and this and that, which tells me that they feel like this would help them do their job. That's all I have.
Just a note for the media. Clay Cooper said, "I don't know anything about copying." In case you missed the quote. You got it?
Oh, great.
Any other alderman
Yeah.
want to share?
So in a lot of the comments from the public here, there was a lot of missing preconditions as what to get you guys to that point where you're going to try to cite them or do something like that. So we're talking the same language. I got the phrases, decisions based on objective and subjective experience before they make that decision. And I've read in the light of the officer's experience. So these decisions aren't, I mean, a lot of times you guys are making decisions on the fly. It has to be immediately, has to be concise, and things can escalate fast. So I just see this where if you can ask them once and ask them twice, and if they don't respond, I would think that you guys want to move to the next step as soon as possible to start, you know, before you have to detain them or actually arrest them, I think, right? Well, you can get to the heart of the matter quicker this way.
Yes, sir.
And so I, taking words out of my mouth, but if the fire department needed an axe, we'd buy them the best ones they could. But this, like you said, this is a tool. This is a tool in your toolbox to get to an end result. And if it's nothing, you move on. Otherwise, it can open a lot of doors from that one particular stop. So.
Any other alderman?
I appreciate our police department, all they do. This is something that helps them, and that's what we need to do.
Can you elaborate a little more, Jamie?
trying to keep it short. We're
Yeah,
on
I think
hour
we're
2.
ready for a vote. Let's vote.
The motion passed 4-1. Alderman Denham, no. Alderman Skanes, yes. Alderman Cooper, yes. Alderman Whitus, yes. And Alderman C, yes.
At this time, I want to announce we've been in a meeting for 2.5 hours, and we are halfway through the consent agenda. I'm going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Just want to point out to you that mine got finished at 9. Touche.
Looking for my city administrator. I need my city administrator.
You know, I've learned more about city code and city law in the last week than I probably ever wanted to learn. All right. Yeah, no. It was very interesting reading.
Call this meeting back to order. Madam Clerk, what is the next consent agenda item?
Item 16.
Already?
Your Honor, the next item is the final reading of Bill Number 6037, an ordinance amending Section 30-31 and Appendix A of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to Sheriff's Retirement Fund surcharge. The floor is open for a motion to approve the final reading of Bill Number 6036.
We have a motion and a second. This was brought down from consent to discuss. Who brought it down?
I did.
Alderman Denham, you want to
Yes.
address this?
Yes, I've been asked by people in my ward for clarity on the portion of the Constitution that this is in violation of, and also the money that was collected for the fund. If there's any follow-up from any of the cities, since this has become unconstitutional, like where's the money gone, and is any accounting of the dollars going to take place? So I guess this would be for Mr. Lebec regarding the constitutional portion of it.
Yes, if the case that's cited in the staff report, there is a direct link to it. On page 3, the allegation is that this violated Article 1, Section 14 of the Missouri Constitution. The bottom line is this was a, trying to simplify this so that we're clear, that I think the best way to say this was a, for lack of better words, we'll call it an unfunded mandate. Basically, there was no authority by the courts to assess this court cost. So that's why it was ruled unconstitutional. Bottom line is we have stopped collecting it. Whether or not it gets removed from the fee schedule, Judge Motley already issued an order, or an administrative order, stopping the collection of it. So as a result of that, this is literally just cleanup. As far as what happens to money collected to this point, I don't have an effective answer of that right now. We have not been provided guidance as to what's going to happen for the $3 that's been collected. If you read the case, the suit was against the Missouri Sheriff's Retirement System. So I imagine at some point there's probably going to have to be a disgorgement of those funds. Again, this is just me speculating as an attorney, but there will probably be further direction from the courts as to how that's to be handled. The immediate result of this was, bottom line, was to stop it because, again, it does not survive an Article 114 challenge.
Okay, thank you.
So real quick, so we're not holding the $3, are we? It gets picked out or moved along?
It's gone.
So we don't have a balance or anything?
No, so what basically happened, and again, the whole issue is this reasonable, and I'm going to use a quote from page 10, is it reasonably related to the expense of the administration of justice, and therefore Article 114? It does not. It's not reasonably related to the administration of justice because, again, it's a retirement fund sitting over here. As far as how we handled it, our court administrator, Johnny May, and the judge, they stopped collecting of this as soon as that order came down. It's in the staff report. I believe it was the end of June or July.
Yeah, it was months, yeah.
And so our court cost went from $31.50 to $28.50 immediately. As soon as the Supreme Court said stop, we stopped. okay? Now our court costs are back up to $34.50 because of the $7 surcharge. So again, we stopped when we were told to stop.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. What,
Are you asking us or?
I'm asking y'all, all y'all.
What's in the fund now? I mean,
No, well, so again, we're not collecting anything. So these monies that the city collects, if you look at Appendix A in our city code, there's a number of line items. For example, the recent one, which was the one that was required with us going on to show me courts, that was a $7 surcharge. That money goes to the state. Okay, so it's not money that's kept internally by the city of Branson. We don't have a little piggy bank on Judge Motley's bench.
I got you.
I'm not trying to make light of this. Bottom line is we collect it, send it to the state, and then the state figures out what to do with it. We stopped collecting it because we were ordered to. Now that that money's up there at the state level in the sheriff's retirement system, there's probably going to be some direction at some point as to how that money gets distributed back to the individuals or the people that were aggrieved.
so this amendment is just that we have stopped.
It is literally part of our cleanup. So the law changes. The law is not a static thing in the United States. It's organic. It changes over time. And as there's new rulings that come down, our code has to change with it. So it's best practice not to leave unconstitutional things sitting in our city codes.
So this amendment is just removing that.
Stripping that line out of our
Okay.
fee schedule. That's
All right.
it.
He raised a good point. Chris, at what point in time was this stopped being collected by most municipal or such type of courts?
Well, what I can tell, hold on, I'm pulling up my staff report so I can give you the specific date. So the case was decided on June 1st.
Of this year?
Of this year, and then
Okay.
on June 29th, the Supreme Court issued an order. What that order did is there's a thing at the state level called a schedule of costs. This talks about the costs of everything. And they issued an order amending that, removing that. So at that point, that was the directive to the municipalities and anybody else that was collecting this, that it was affected by the decision to stop collecting.
So before that point, there wasn't a stay order on that, and the recipient of those monies could have already dispersed them, so we're only basically looking at maybe a month or two.
Correct. But again, those monies go upstairs. Upstairs, that's going to be between sheriff's retirement system and the aggrieved parties. Again, city we collect and we remit.
I've got a lot of questions. I'll deal with it another time, but I appreciate you.
Alderman Skeens, are you sure you're not trying to punish me for missing last month's
No,
meeting?
sir, we got 5 more minutes.
Ready to vote on this?
I just wonder if they're gonna make them pay that money back years past.
The motion carried 5-0.
Thank you. Good news is we're on the last consent item.
Your Honor, the next item is the final reading of Bill Number 6038, an ordinance approving the real estate donation agreement with Real Estate Recovery LLC for the donation of property and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement. The floor is open for a motion to approve the final reading of Bill Number 6038.
Yes.
Should have been 17.
We have a motion and a second on the floor, and we would be ready for any discussion.
Thank you. I was ready to vote. I'm not sure who asked to have this removed from the consent agenda.
Pearl.
Oh, Pearl.
My name is Pearl Haining.
Have you moved?
No. I had just a couple questions on this. When I was looking at this on the agenda, it said that the reason this is being donated is because of the owners wanting to avoid paying back taxes from a previous owner. But the amount of those taxes is in excess of $1 million. I'm just wondering, to whom are those taxes owed? Does that go to the city or the state? Who would be collecting or not collecting those taxes because of this donation?
Alderman's back.
Yeah, thank you. That's a.
Attorney.
Gosh, I hope not. That's a great question, Pearl. So with regards to the taxes, there's two buckets. It's real estate taxes, property taxes, and also CID assessments. So that piece of property is part of the Branson Hills Community Improvement District. So if you ever buy anything up there, you will notice your tax rate may be just a little bit different than elsewhere in the city. That's the other bucket of taxes. Now, as far as why this real estate investment company wants to give it to us, I suspect that's probably why. Don't know for sure. It would just be speculation. But the bottom line is, from my analysis and from outside counsel's analysis, because again, this is a complicated transaction, so from time to time I bring in outside counsel to assist people that are experts in these areas, is it appears like they bought the property thinking they could wipe the taxes off of it, clear it, and then develop it. And they were unsuccessful at the Southern District in that, so they have no utility with the property. There's only two paths it can go to. So they can either keep it, pay the taxes, and do something with it, which you saw the amount. It is significant. It's $1.3 million plus. Or they can donate it to a not-for-profit or a municipality. When that happens, so if it comes to a municipality, those taxes still sit on the property. So we're taking a risk, because once we consume the property, we can never, if we decide to sell it at some point in the future, then those taxes come due. Okay, so those will have to be paid. That will have to be a part of the transaction. So what it boils down to is there's only a couple paths for this company to take since they lost their court case. One of them was, here city, here municipality, do you want this? But as to the why, I suspect it's because they lost their court case and they want to move it off their books. Part of our agreement with them, if you look at the contract or the real estate agreement that sits behind the ordinance, we have to provide them with an IRS form that shows that this was a donation. So again, they're trying to, through the federal government, trying to basically show some of their losses from this transaction. So again, there is a benefit to the city in the fact that we now have 156 plus acres sitting directly adjacent to the recplex. But there's also a risk to the city because, again, we're taking on a piece of property that has tax revenue due to the county, tax revenue due to the CID. So as long as we own it, that's not collectible. Okay.
Real quick, I think I've asked you this before, but is the clock running on those taxes?
Right now it is until we take it.
Do the deal and then it
Until we
freezes?
do the deed. And the deed, this is the other kind of risk out there. This is going to be conveyed to us by a quitclaim deed, so it's not a general warranty deed.
Right.
And as far as title's concerned, normally when you do if you were to buy a home, we would have title insurance, okay? This property really has no value.
Right.
So we can't get a title company to provide us title insurance. So that's why outside counsel was brought in, because we can do a title search. We can do the own due diligence ourselves and figure out, is there anything else encumbering this property? Bottom line, it's CID and real estate taxes. So with those risks in mind, the city looks at this as a potential opportunity to basically enhance some of our green space, basically do some things under our community plan 2030.
So no value for conventional construction, but to us, yeah, I've walked it. So for us, it's something we can do something with.
Potentially, and again, I'm not going to speak for our fantastic Parks Director, but I think she has some ideas as to how this is going to help benefit the citizens of Branson with board approval.
Okay, thank you for that context. Follow-up question then with that is, if we do accept this donation, seeing as it's not really a great situation to expect a developer to invest in, that becomes something that the city would be looking to develop. I've heard mentions of a park or a walking trail, something like that. But my question with that is, how much of a liability and investment does that become to the city? Because we already have substantial debt. And yes, walking trails are nice. And we do have a good parks department, but we already have a lot of good parks and walking trails. And so I was just wondering what's the risk assessment there? Weighing not having this property versus having this property, and yes, it's a quote-unquote donation, but how much money is the city going to end up sinking into that just because we now have it?
My understanding is our fantastic Parks Department, I believe they're going to be looking at hiking trails, biking trails, outdoor activities. The topography is real rough on this, which makes it non-conducive for conventional construction. But for outdoor activities and expanding our open space in the city, from my point of view, I looked at it. I know we didn't get title insurance, but the attorneys checked to make sure that there aren't any other obligations on it. I believe, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think other than the capital improvements we put into it for hiking, biking, et cetera, and the maintaining of that, I don't believe the city would have other expenses, would we, Chris?
There would be other expenses. As far as liability, it's the same liability that would extend to any other city property. So sovereign immunity provides us an umbrella for a lot of things. One of the things it doesn't if there's a known dangerous condition on the land. So let's say Cindy decides to dig a 400-foot sinkhole on this piece of property, and then Alderman C falls in it. Well, then C would probably have the probability of suing the city and being successful because we created a dangerous condition. So from a risk analysis standpoint, that's the only liability. When you look at the actual transaction itself, this property has been sitting in this posture since prior to 2016. So what I would tell you is if it hasn't sold now, it probably won't sell because, again, it's not worth $1.356 million.
So I was going to ask, since we're doing it this way, or proposing to do it, there's no reason for an appraisal?
It's a straight donation. So appraisals come into play, and this is where our finance director would lend her expertise. We typically would seek an appraisal if we're getting ready to sell property because, again, we have to demonstrate to the citizens that we're selling something at fair market value.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
You
you.
good? Thank you,
That
Pearl.
answered my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'm ready to take a vote, please.
The motion carried 5-0.
Now we move on to the regular agenda. Alrighty.
Your Honor, the next item is a public hearing and first reading of Bill Number 6041, an ordinance establishing the annual levy of a property tax for general revenue in the city of Branson, Missouri, a city of the fourth class. Your Honor, because we have a public hearing on this, we won't take that motion until we get through the public hearing.
So I need to open up a public hearing. I guess if I read my notes. We will now open this public hearing and begin with a staff report from Jamie Rauch. Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. This is our annual property tax levy, and it's proposed and calculated, what we presented before you tonight, prior to the Board of Equalization meeting and the numbers. So we published the notice in the paper as required by state law, and we usually bump it up just a little bit, the .6277, in order that when the post Board of Equalization numbers come back in, that it would still meet the requirements to fall below the public hearing threshold. So basically what I'm saying is that .6277, and actually I should share with you that we got those numbers today after the BOE meeting, and so we've already calculated it. So we know that it will come in under, so we won't have to have another public hearing. So what was published in the paper was the .6277. We calculated those based off of the numbers that the county gave us for the assessed valuations for the real property, the agriculture, the personal, and those kind of things. Once we calculated that, then we put it in the paper. And now we're bringing it before you. And then on the second reading, or this to be approved and passed through on the second reading, we will have that actual rate for you to approve as well. Do you have any comments from anybody in the audience? Any members of the board?
Yes, sir. Did you allude to a second reading tonight, or that just for edification?
That I was just for clarification that the actual rate will come because we didn't receive the post-BOE numbers until today in the calculation. Sure. So, any other comments? The public hearing is now closed.
The floor is open for a motion for the first reading of Bill Number 6041.
Have it up there already? Wow. We have a motion and a second. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak to this matter? Any aldermen? Let's vote.
The motion carried 5-0. Your Honor, the next item is the first reading of Bill Number 6042, an ordinance amending the adopted 2021 budget for the City of Branson to adjust monies in the Parks Internal Service Fund for resurfacing the Parnell Park Tennis Court as a portion of the Mill and Overlay Project. The floor is open for a motion to approve the first reading of Bill Number 6042.
We have a motion and a second. And we'll now have a staff report from Jamie. Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. This is a budget amendment. The budget amendment is needed in the Parks Internal Service Fund to account for the expense for the overlay of the tennis court, or I should say the resurfacing of the tennis court for the Parnell Park. And what I'd like to say is that this was approved in the capital last year, and then obviously the capital got put on hold, and it already had gone through our priority-based budgeting and all of those kind of things. So we are recommending approval for this budget amendment in the amount of $12,352, and it is accounted for in the internal service fund for the Parks Department. Thank you. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak to this matter? Any members of the board? Hearing none, let's vote.
The motion carried 5-0.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the next item It's the first reading of Bill number 6043, an ordinance approving the contract with White River Valley Electric Cooperative for relocation costs of telecommunication facilities relating to the West 76 Country Boulevard Improvements Project and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. The floor is open for a motion to approve the first reading of Bill number 6043.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll get a staff report from Mr. Francis.
Mayor, members of the board, this is our last and final construction contract for our utility undergrounding for the Highway 76 project with White River Valley Electric. This contract is in the amount of $1,043,436.46. If you remember last week, we done the budget amendment, or not last week, the last council meeting, the budget amendment, and it was on the consent agenda also tonight, and which this money is already accounted for. This will initiate the process for the utility companies to order the material for White River Valley Electric. And also, I don't know if it's appropriate time, Lisa, to say this, but we are asking for a double read tonight to expedite so they can go ahead and get the material ordered for a double read. We've got to answer any questions and recommend approval.
Thank you, Keith. Any members in the audience wishing to comment? Any members of the board?
Mayor.
Yep.
So are any of our other vendors in the same situation for lead time and getting things ordered? Or just?
The final reading on those other 4 contracts was denied also. And as soon as we get those executed after Mayor executes.
We don't try to bunch them, or?
We're gonna hurt. We're trying to move this along because they're all still telling us 3 to 6 months lead
Gotcha.
time.
So it's
on
not just one of
material.
them, it's all of them?
Right.
Okay,
right.
thanks.
One example is we've had 2 PED crossings out on 76, and we've been waiting a month just for some wire and cable to get them wired up now. It's crazy.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Because the goal to start this is right after New Year's, is that?
That's our goal.
Right.
Now, it's all
And
depending
you're
on getting material, though.
3 to 6 months out, so that's why you're asking for a double read? Because
sir.
if
That's
not,
correct.
you're at least another 2 weeks from now.
That's correct.
Yeah, they're really under crunch for this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I would like to, for transparency purposes, I would like the public to know that these underground utilities on Highway 76, we've been talking about these
Several years.
now. What I want to share is the CID, the 76 CID, which is a separate entity. They owe the city they owed the city $9.3 million, give or take. They have paid that down to about $8.5 million, give or take. So the CID owes the city $8.5 million. What the CID is proposing, which we've accepted, is the CID is going to advance $1.9 million to the city from the money they owe for the city to have the money to go put in this infrastructure. That allows the city to keep our capital reserves. So we're doing this without monies from the city, getting advance payments from CID, and the CID, in addition to the $1.9 million advance for this purpose, for putting in the utilities, the CID has agreed to repay the balance of the monies owed to the city at $500,000, Stan?
$500,000 annually.
$500,000 annually. So I just wanted to clarify that if anybody in the community had questions on that. Any more comments from the board? Let's vote.
That motion carried 5-0.
Your Honor, I move to read Bill number 6043 for its final reading. due to the time crunch.
So, wait, let me fix that. Alderman Cooper made that motion.
Oh, was I not supposed to?
No. And then Alderman Skanes seconded it. Thank you.
I didn't do it.
No, somebody was a little quick to. We're good.
So this is the motion and the second to approve a second reading. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let's vote on that.
That motion carried 5-0.
Keith, I hear that Alderman Skanes and Alderman Cooper are out there at night on West 76 with a screwdriver, so maybe they can fix that crosswalk light.
Good luck.
We don't sleep.
I'll take more than a screwdriver for that one.
Your Honor, this is the final reading, Bill number 6043, an ordinance approving the contract with White River Valley Electric Cooperative for relocation costs of telecommunication facilities relating to the West 76 Country Boulevard Improvements Project and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. The floor is open for a motion to approve the final reading of Bill number 6043.
We have a motion and a second. Anybody in the audience wishing to address this? Any members of the board? Hearing none, let's vote.
That motion carried 5-0. Your Honor, the next item is the first reading of Bill number 6044, an ordinance approving a telecommunications duct bank agreement with CenturyLink and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. The floor is open for a motion to approve the first reading of Bill number 6044. I did. I did. Yeah. Yeah, they did.
Stan?
They did. Yeah. We were quick.
Alderman C, would you wake Stan up over there?
What's in that cup?
Do you think did I do that wrong? Stan thinks I'm wrong.
I heard them make the motion to do the second read and vote on
Here's
that.
here's the first reading. And then we had,
Then they had the motion
and then here's the motion
to do the second
to
read.
do the second read right there. Motion to read a final read. This is great technology. It just takes me a minute for my computer to go. But and here's your motion for the final read.
Okay. You and your technology win.
That's okay. I honor to make mistakes myself.
We need to
so
get her
it's
some more RAM.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm on the first reading of this.
Item 22.
So we have a motion and a second. We open the votes, and it carried 5-0.
Now we go to second read.
And we did not have a second read on this one. So we're on item 23. Everybody with me?
Question. There's not a second read on 22, just one read.
Just one.
Did not have a request on that one.
Thank you.
This is actually a separate item that will allow us to get fiber from our building out to 76. But the folks from CenturyLink, well, you'll hear this in a moment, but the individuals from CenturyLink contacted us because they're putting in the duct bank, and they wanted to let us be part of that process on their dime.
Stan, are you in cahoots with Alderman Skanes? Okay, so we're on item 23.
Yes.
And I think okay, here's some,
22.
what? I'm on 23.
We're on 23.
23 is a duct bank.
We passed the duck bike.
Here's your motion Here's your second. It's been carried. It was approved for item 22 for the dump bank right there. And we're done. That was 22.
We are not redoing this whole meeting, I can tell you that right now.
We should have left the live stream off.
Okay.
I think they actually, what they did was, I think when they did the second read,
Okay, so we'll just clear this. We're good.
I swear.
So we
to
have a
God.
motion and a second on item 22. We're good, go.
Okay, now we're ready. Anything you want to share on item 22, Keith? Stan pretty much covered it, really. This basically is a four-duct bank coming from CenturyLink's main office, just up here by 4th Street. And it'll run down, Chad, I think he had a map he's going to put up there. Oh. Anyway, here's their office. It's going to come down here, jog down through here. Is it the purple line?
Purple
Keith?
line down there?
Purple line, down through here, all down through here, crosses over, comes down the alleyway, the main line's right over here on the one side, off the alleyway. In the future, this is going to. Speak into the mic, please. Thank you, Keith. In the future, this is going to help us, that the duct bank is already going to be in the ground for us, for our fiber. And Chad can elaborate on that if he likes to. But dig once is my theory here, and not tear stuff up again if we can do it. And we had an opportunity to do this. The cost of the conduit was approximately $8,000. I had it in here. $8,147. The total project for the repairs and everything was $28,618. We're going to make these street crossings and some sidewalk repairs with our own city crews. So CenturyLink is going to we will invoice them for, excuse me. CenturyLink will. Into your mic, please. CenturyLink will, the difference to be paid to the city will be $20,470.21. So anyway, we'll make the repairs. They're going to reimburse us the $20,000 to make the repairs with. So that's what this contract will be with CenturyLink then. Let's do more of those. Yeah. Wish we had more of these. More of these, yeah. Because if we had, the total contract with CenturyLink on this was approximately $300,000+.
Holy moly.
Wow. And if we had to do it ourselves, our estimates were, give or take $100,000 or so. So it's a good deal for the city, we thought. And although we're not going to put the fiber in the duct bank right now, the duct bank will be there for our future use and everything.
So when you're ready, you can just pull it.
Exactly. And Chad Keek can chime in more about this fiber stuff because it's.
No, I think everyone's on, it sounds like everyone's understanding it. Yeah, this will give us the ability to have a conduit. And, anytime the cost often isn't the fiber itself, it's the conduit, it's tearing up roadways, sidewalks, redoing all that. And since CenturyLink came to us and said, hey, we have this project, the city said, hey, we're interested. Can we have a conduit in this as well? And we're allowed to do that with minimal cost. It's a real win-win situation. And we may not use this for a few years, but when we do, it's going to save us a tremendous amount of money.
That's great. Hold on.
So opportunities like this, is that because
Excuse
you
me,
guys?
Alderman, say, when do you get comments from are there any comments from the audience? Okay, comments from the board, Jeff, I'm sorry.
No. So did this come about because they were pulling permits, or you knew they were going to do the work, or is there this communication where, hey, we're opening the ground? And
We work pretty close with most of the utility companies right here in town, and just talking back and forth, they approached us about it, and I talked to Administrator Dobbins about it, and it seemed like a excellent deal for the city here to jump on this and try to get it through, so.
Agreed, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Big savings here.
Kendall, do we have any water or sewer lines in this area that we can kind of?
I'll bet you we could hit them. I just know we can. Any other comments on the board? Hearing none, let's vote.
Alderman C, you want to vote on that?
I'm showing green, so I
Okay.
don't know if
Are you voting yes? Is that a yes vote?
it is a yes.
Thank you. That motion carry 5-0. Your Honor, the next item is first reading bill number 6045, an ordinance approving the amendment to the contract with Chemtrade Chemicals U.S. LLC for the purchase of operational chemicals used in the city's water treatment processes and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract. The floor is open for a motion to approve the first reading bill number 6045.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll get a staff report from Kendall. Good evening. Chemtrade Chemicals is currently contracted to supply our coagulant for the water treatment process. Chemtrade has requested a price increase of just under 4.5 cents per pound of product due to a 47% increase across the industry supply. In order to finish out our 2021, we will see an estimated operational cost increase of just over $3,900. Funds are available within our current operating budget. Available to answer any questions. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak on this? Any members of the board? Any members of the board?
Yes, Kendall, I just have a question. For any of our water treatment, is the public able to get ingredients that are included in the chemicals that we use in our water treatment plant?
Certainly, yes, we could do that.
Okay, so they would just contact you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not trying to hold you up, believe me.
Really going to talk about chemicals?
Okay. Is this an existing contract and they asked for additional money? Do we have to honor giving them this? Or was it just an honor situation going on?
I can give you some background, some details here. We don't have to honor this. They have the ability to opt out of their contract with a 30-day notice, and they have provided that notice to us. A little bit of background. Back in 2019, we conducted bids for our chemical, and Chemtrade was not the lowest bidder. They was next to the lowest bidder. We actually went with the lowest bidder up until September of 2020, when the chemical, the original lowest bidder's chemical, did not meet our treatment process standards. So we ran into some issues. We was actually using 20% more material than originally expected. We do conduct chemical trials of the chemicals when through the bidding process, but with our water coming from the lake, that water changes from the time of the year. The chemical makeup of the water changes throughout the year. So as we went on progressed through the year, it started using more and more chemicals, and it was actually going to cost us more. So we opted to drop out of that contract and go with the next lowest bidder. We approached Chemtrade, which we've worked with in the past, and they actually, in September of 2020, they honored their 2019 pricing, and stuck with that for the end of the 2020 year and continued on through 2021. The next lowest bidder is actually 5 cents per pound higher than this increase. So I think, and I don't think they're going to, the likelihood of them honoring that bid is slim to none at this point in the game. So.
Did we expect that there's going to be price increase again next year? What particular chemical are we talking about? One more time, refresh our memory.
This is our coagulant. It's an aluminum-based chemical. So basically what this does is it captures all the nutrients in the water, makes them settle out, makes them heavy. So they settle out in the treatment process, and we're allowed to, then that allows us to remove those through that process. I suspect that our bidding process, upcoming bidding process here in September and October is going to be very interesting in how, with the cost of the industry right now and what everybody's seeing and the supply and demand.
Thank you.
Alderman Skanes, you're killing me.
Yeah.
Don't you want to ask how many trucks it takes? Or-
5.
Right. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, let's vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pushed the wrong button. But I fixed it with 5 trucks.
Motion carried 5-0.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the next item is the canceling of 2021 Board of Aldermen meetings. The floor is open for a motion to cancel this December 23rd, 2021 study session and December 28th, 2021 regular meeting.
I think we ought to meet.
You can vote against it. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Well, no.
Hearing none, let's vote. You guys are rough on the mayor, boy.
That motion carried 5-0. Be sure to update your calendars.
Yeah, I'll be getting on that.
Okay. Whew.
I thought it went pretty smooth.
So we're going to go through the mayor reports without Alderman Skanes and without Administrator Dobbin. So we'll start with Alderman Denham.
I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Skanes?
Yes, sir.
Alderman Cooper?
I've said enough, thank you.
Alderman Whitus?
No comment at this time.
Alderman Say?
Nothing to report.
See? Administrator Dobbins?
No report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
I would like to make one report. I received a communication today from the restaurant at Florentina's, and they sent me a photo of half a dozen cards or so that were placed on their employees' cars. And the document said it's from Olive Garden, gave the address of Olive Garden, and a handwritten note said we're hiring line cooks from $17 to $18 an hour. Placed on the windshield of Florentina's employees.
Wait a minute. It was from Olive Garden?
Yes.
Okay.
So in this mayor's opinion, I'm not sure that's how we want to do business. I wanted to raise it to the community's awareness, and I'm frowning upon that. I'll trust my board will frown upon that. And I wanted to bring it to light, and with the intent of hopefully putting an end to it and discouraging others from the same practice. We are all, every single one of us, we're in a labor crisis. Soliciting employees from a competing business is not the way I would like to see us do business in Branson. That is the end of my report. Next item is to adjourn. Is that correct?
Next item is adjourned into executive session. The floor is open for a motion. I need somebody to read that specifically.
You want me to
Take
read
so
that?
long.
Why do I have
You're
to?
doing so good.
Let Jamie do it. He hadn't said a lot of time. No, go ahead, Jamie.
I'd like to move to go into closed executive session pursuant to 610-021-1 RSMO for litigation.
Just an oral vote, Madam Clerk, or,
We have a motion and a second, and
Yeah.
I can open votes if you want to vote.
okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I've just been informed by our attorney that the matter that he needed to discuss with you is not necessary to discuss further tonight. So thank you very much.
I'd like to withdraw that motion.
We got a motion to adjourn.
Lord have mercy.
Let me close that. The motion carried 5-0.
So we're good, yes?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody, very much for putting up with the shenanigans
I
tonight.
have a motion by everybody voting yes on this.
Yes.
And Alderman Skanes, yes. Thank you.
Something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. I tell you, popcorn, we need popcorn.
We'll sell popcorn next week.